Welcome to Buddhism Seeds. Tonight, I invite you to step into a journey that is both very old and very new. A journey that requires no traveling, only returning. Returning to the breath, returning to yourself, returning to the silence that has always been there beneath the noise of daily thoughts and worries. Together, we will explore the art of letting go. Not through theories or concepts, but through simple stories, small slices of life carrying great wisdom. Each story is a doorway opening not for you to escape, but for you to pause, gently, without pressure, without effort. You don't need to understand everything. You don't need to memorize. Just listen with your heart. Whatever touches you, let it stay. Whatever doesn't, let it drift away like clouds passing across the sky. If your eyes are still open, you may close them now. Let your shoulders drop. Let your face soften. Let your breath return to its natural rhythm. Like waves against the shore, like leaves falling lightly, like the moon rising without announcement. Let tonight be a quiet space, a silence wide enough for you to hear the voice within, the voice that has always been there, though we often miss it because we are too busy living. I will walk with you as we open the doorway into ancient wisdom, a place where worries and burdens no longer need to be carried. Just presence, with this breath, with this heart. Take a deep breath in and slowly breathe out. We begin. On the busiest street of the town where crowds and merchants' calls filled the air every day, there was a small tea shop tucked between large store fronts. No flashy signboard, no lively music, but anyone who had ever stepped inside never forgot it. It was the tea shop of Nuru, a middle-aged man with silver in his hair and eyes as deep as long-brewed tea. Nuru was known not only for the quality of his tea, but for his presence, gentle, precise, refined like the leaves he loved. Years ago, he began his tea journey with the soul of an artist. Each morning, he rose before the sun, opening his shop, while dew still clung to the rooftops. In the small room, he lit the charcoal, washed the teapots, and tasted the tea, not to check quality, but to listen to each note of flavor, as if conversing with the earth and sky. People came not only to buy tea, they came to sit in silence, sip hot water, and let their hearts calm in the presence of someone who loved tea with a pure heart. Yet time flows like a rushing river. Nothing remains unchanged. When the shop grew famous, when online praise spread, when long lines of tourists formed outside, Nuru began to change. He brought in trending teas that stirred nothing in him when first smelled. He hired decorators to remake the shop in the popular minimalist Japanese style. He learned how to smile the right way, say the right things customers wanted to hear, and present his teas like a skilled salesman, no longer like a lover of tea. The praise increased, sales rose, revenue grew. But inside Nuru, something grew thinner, weaker, slipping away unnamed. Until one festival day with crowds flooding in, he praised the same tea in two opposite ways within 20 minutes. First, he called it a masterpiece of nature. Later, he said it was a bit harsh, lacking aftertaste. No one noticed. But Nuru froze, not from fear of being caught, but because he no longer knew if his words were true or false, and he no longer knew which side of himself was speaking. That night, he closed early. Without telling anyone, he put on a coat, left the street, and walked toward the hills, where a small, quiet temple sat at the town's edge. The moon was high, casting silver light on the leaf-strewn path. In the temple's rock garden he sat down, not to pray but to be silent. After a while, footsteps approached. A voice spoke softly. "It seems today's tea wasn't very good, was it?" It was Master Rio, the old monk living there who often spoke with visitors but never preached. Nuru gave a sad smile, then confessed everything. The false praise, the inner confusion, the endless doubt. I once truly loved tea, but now I don't know if I still love tea or only love the way people look at me when they say, "He understands tea so deeply." Master Rio nodded unsurprised. Then he asked, "If tomorrow no one praised you again, if no one ever called you a tea master, would you still want to keep the shop?" The question had no force, but it fell like a pebble into a still pond. Ripples spread, touching the deepest part of Nuru's heart. He could not answer, not because he didn't know, but because he had never dared to ask himself. The next morning, he didn't rush to open the shop. He sat in the kitchen, taking out the tea he once loved, dry coarse leaves with a gentle bitterness and subtle sweet aftertaste. He brewed it as he once had. No display, no fancy tools, no decoration. Just boiling water leaves and his heart. When the first sip touched his tongue, he closed his eyes. It was like meeting an old friend long forgotten. The taste was still there. It needed no applause, no recognition, only presence. From then on, the shop slowly changed. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but little by little, the flashy decor disappeared. Teas he didn't truly believe in were taken down. Greetings became slower, warmer, and in the afternoons he sat with customers, not to persuade but to listen. One longtime guest, after finishing his cup, looked at him and said, "These days your tea is not only delicious, it is true." Nuru smiled, saying nothing, but this time the smile wasn't to impress. It was because within everything had finally settled. He no longer needed praise, no longer needed to be called an expert, for he knew he had returned to what was first and last worth keeping, his true love of tea. And like the finest teas in the world, that love never needed to be forced. It only needed to be kept warm in the right way at the right time. From then on, in a noisy corner of town, there was still a tea shop open every day. Not to prove anything, but to give a place where someone lost could step in, sit down, and rediscover a sip of something simple, deep, and real. Nuru's story is not just about a tea cellar. It reflects a silent but universal truth. The deepest suffering does not come from circumstances, but from losing oneself to please others. When Nuru adjusted his words, his smile, his service, only to match the market's expectations, he no longer drank tea with his heart, but with his ego. Gradually, he could no longer tell what was genuine and what was a role played too long. This is attachment to the false self, clinging to the image we think others want to see, instead of living as our true being. In Buddhist teaching, this is called living in the illusion of self. When you care more about how others see you than how you are truly living, you step away from your own path. The Buddha once taught, "There is no path to happiness. Happiness is the path." And Nuru, sitting alone with his old pot of tea, eyes closed, tasting the gentle bitterness and deep sweetness, found that path again, without applause, without titles, simply by being himself. Imagine standing before a large mirror. Day after day you adjust your face, your clothes, your posture, not because you love yourself, but because you want the image to please someone watching. The strange thing is, the more you perfect the image, the more you forget. What do you look like when there is no mirror? The more you chase the shadow, the further it runs ahead. But if you turn toward the sun, the shadow falls behind. That is returning. Returning to the light. Returning to yourself. And from there, true freedom begins. One of modern life's quiet temptations is recognition. We don't only want to do well, we want others to know we did well. The danger is when your actions are guided by the need for acknowledgement, your inner freedom is placed in someone else's hands. The key, as Buddhism teaches, is mindfulness, especially toward the craving for praise, approval, and being seen. The more you live to satisfy others, the further you drift from your own heart, until one day you no longer know what you truly love, only what makes others happy. There is one powerful, necessary question before every decision. If no one ever knew I did this, would I still do it? If the answer is yes, you are living true. If the answer is uncertain, perhaps you are living someone else's life. Daily mindfulness practice, even 5 minutes, can help you hear your inner voice again. When you sit quietly without performing, without needing to be seen, you begin to see what is truly yours and what is only a social role. A simple yet deep practice each evening. Write down 3 things you did today. Then ask, did I do this because I loved it or because I thought someone wanted me to? You will begin to see small cracks, which are also the openings to return to yourself. According to a study from Harvard University, people who live authentically report 30% higher levels of happiness compared to those who constantly seek social approval. When you live true, the brain produces more serotonin, the hormone that nourishes peace, relaxation, and contentment. Sometimes the deepest recognition doesn't come from others' eyes, but from the moment you can look in the mirror and smile softly. I lived true to myself today. And in that, no spotlight is needed, because your own presence is light enough. When Nuru let go of the need for applause and returned to the true taste, he rediscovered his natural peace. But not everyone is bound by others' eyes. Some are bound by a past they cannot forgive. And that unforgiveness itself becomes the burden that kills each present moment. Have you ever wondered why some people can remain unusually calm in the middle of adversity, while others panic, judge, or explode in anger? They simply sit still without resistance, without strain. It is not that they do not feel, but that they have learned to live more deeply with all changes. Just like the Buddha's teaching in the Anguttara Nikaya, the wise are like a rock unmoved by praise or blame, by sun or rain, by gain or loss. We often feel unsettled when life goes off schedule, like an untimely rain falling on a festival day. But the truth is, life never follows our personal calendar. And if we wait for everything to go our way before allowing peace, then peace will never arrive. The next story is about a gatekeeper. Someone everyone thought was ordinary. Yet, he was the only one who did not panic when the whole village lost direction because of an untimely rain. In a high mountain region covered with clouds all year, there was an ancient temple nestled among old pine forests. The road leading up was like a winding thread, weaving through shadowy woods and mossy cliffs. On rare, clear days, the temple appeared like a cloud resting on the mountaintop, silent, solemn, and sacred beyond words. The villagers at the mountain's base called it the temple in the clouds. They believed it was not only a place of worship, but also a bridge between the human and the divine. Each month had its rituals, but the most important was the full moon ceremony of the second month, considered the moment when the first moon after the spring equinox touched the heaven's gate. It was said to be the only day of the year when prayers, if sincere, could rise directly to the celestial realm. So, a week before, the whole village became busy. The young carried spring water from the high waterfall. Elderly women picked dry lotus flowers, bundled incense sticks, and polished old oil lamps. Each person took up a task unspoken, as if every step of the ritual had already been imprinted from generations past. They believed if the timing was wrong, the rite would lose power. If there was disorder, the Buddha would not witness it. Everything had to align with the beat of the drum with the exact moment. Some even watched the moon each night to ensure the full moon would shine at the sacred hour. Amid all this busy preparation, there was one man who did not join in any activity. Akimi, the old gatekeeper of the temple. No one knew where he came from. Some said he once carried stones to build the temple. Others said he was once a great monk who left monastic life. But whoever he was, Akimi now lived alone in a small bamboo-roofed hut by the cliff next to the temple gate. His job was simple: open the gate in the morning, close it in the evening. Each day he chopped wood, brewed tea, swept the stone yard at the gate. He did not chant sutras. He did not preach dharma. He did not lecture anyone. To others, he was a man of no affairs, harmless, unnoticed. But if you observed carefully, every step he took was as light as a cloud. Every movement carried a natural quietness, as if he was not hurrying toward any future, only present in the moment. Then the full moon day came. The sky was perfectly clear since dawn. The moon had not fully set, still hovering over the western trees, its silver glow blending with the brightening sky. Monks in saffron robes gathered. Villagers filled the courtyard. Drums were ready, lamps and candles placed precisely. Everything seemed perfect. And then, clouds rolled in. Not light patches, but a thick black sheet rushing from behind the mountains like a blanket across the sky. And before anyone could react, rain poured down. Not a drizzle, but a sudden torrent, as if a bucket was overturned from the heavens. The courtyard flooded. Oil lamps sputtered out. Incense turned soggy. Monks scrambled for tarps. Villagers huddled under eaves, shocked, frantic, some even weeping. For this sacred day came only once a year. Months of effort, all hope, dissolving into the rain. Yet amid the chaos, one man sat still, Akimi. He sat on the stone steps by the gate, unhurried, unbothered. Holding a warm cup of tea, his eyes followed raindrops falling through the pine branches. Wind soaked his robe, but he did not move. He only sipped occasionally, then returned to silence. A young man rushing with a tarp saw him and shouted angrily, "Why aren't you doing anything? The whole village is in chaos. Today is the most important day of the year. Don't you know that?" Akemi turned his eyes, neither blaming nor defending. He replied gently, "I know today is the full moon, but I also know it is raining." The young man stormed off, seeing only indifference in those words. But minutes later, the abbot, a monk over 70, walked out from the main hall. He saw Akemi sitting in the rain as if untouched by it, silent like an ancient tree. He stopped and asked, "How do you see this?" Akemi did not look at him. He simply pointed toward the gray sky and said, "The rain does not come to ruin the ceremony. The rain is just doing its work." The abbot closed his eyes briefly. Then, without explanation, he returned inside and ordered the ceremony postponed. Instead of rituals in the courtyard, he invited everyone into the main hall. No incense, no chanting, no offerings, just meditation. In the damp air of rain and human breath, people sat shoulder to shoulder in silence. Raindrops tapped on the tiled roof. Some fell onto robes. No one spoke. And in that moment, the silence deepened. No sutras were read. No bells or drums rang. Yet every person, from elders to children, felt as if for the first time they truly heard something from within. After that day, no one mentioned the ruined ceremony. Instead, they spoke of something else. That morning of meditating in the rain, a rare moment of awakening. People began to look at Akemi differently. Some called him the man who knew the rain, others the hermit. But he remained the same, opening the gate each morning, closing it each evening. No lectures, no explanations. Only one thing changed from then on. Children in the village, whenever they climbed to the temple, quietly placed their palms together and bowed before him. Not because he had done anything grand, but because they realized some wisdom needs no words. They gave him a new name, the Zen Master of Silence. Akemi's story is not just a light tale of a rainy temple day. It is a mirror reflecting the restless human mind, unwilling to accept that some things are beyond control. We do not suffer because of circumstances, but because of our expectation that circumstances must obey us. We do not suffer because of rain, but because we demand sunshine on the full moon day. Akemi did not see the rain as a disaster, but simply as life unfolding. When questioned why he did not act, he did not justify, did not preach. He only said as lightly as breath, "I know today is the full moon, but I also know it is raining." It sounded simple but carried deep transformation, from resistance to acceptance, from opposition to harmony. In Buddhist teaching, this is called accord with Dharma. Accord does not mean surrender or resignation. It is wisdom that knows what can be changed and what must be released. Like one rowing a boat in strong current, if you fight against it, the boat only shakes. But if you loosen your grip at the right time, feel the flow adjust your oar, not only will you not sink, you may go farther. Akemi did not try to fix reality. He listened to it, not wishing the sky would stop raining for the sake of ritual, not forgetting that nature has its own law. By letting go of personal will, he could sit calmly while the world rushed in panic. The real question is who truly connected with that full moon ritual, those who ran for tarps crying over a broken ceremony, or Akemi, who did not chant, did not step onto the altar, but understood deeply the meaning of meditation in the rain. Silence is not chasing a perfect scene. Silence is seeing life as it is, without needing it to be different. Sometimes the greatest lesson comes from someone who says nothing at all. To live like Akemi, to sit quietly in the rain and smile. You do not need to abandon work, move to a mountain, or become a temple gatekeeper. You only need to learn to pause. Pause, right before reaction. In modern life, everything happens quickly. A message irritates you. An email makes you feel disrespected. A word tightens your chest, and before noticing you react anger, sharp words, judgment. But if you pause for just a few seconds, you create space to choose between unconscious reaction and mindful response. Begin with one simple question. Am I seeing reality or my expectation of reality? That question can shift your entire emotion. Practice 3 mindful breaths whenever something upsets you. Just 3 breaths, enough to return to yourself, enough to transform your inner energy. When facing adversity, don't rush to act. First observe your mind. Am I resisting or am I opening for resistance? Whether against rain or circumstance, is the beginning of suffering. And each morning, instead of praying only for everything to go well, try asking for something deeper. May I smile even when things don't go my way. Science also supports akemi. A study at the University of California showed that people who practiced just 10 minutes of mindfulness meditation daily after 8 weeks had a more stable nervous system when facing uncontrollable events like traffic jams, late appointments, power outages, or, yes, an unexpected rain. You do not need to turn your life into a monastery. You only need to turn each moment into a place of awareness. Then, among all the things you cannot control, you will discover what Akemi knew long ago. Peace does not come from arranging the outer world, but from how you take a deep breath before choosing. Not everyone can sit calmly like Akemi in a storm falling on the holiest day of the year. But many people like him have once tried to control everything so tightly that they lost the joy of living. They did not sit still, but chased perfection until exhausted by their own demands. In this life, how many times have you felt powerless because things didn't go your way? You plan, carefully try to control every detail, and then just one small thing happens outside your expectations, and you feel like you're collapsing. That feeling isn't unusual. Many people live as if they must manage the entire universe, as if they loosen their grip even a little, everything will fall apart. Yet sometimes, precisely because they hold on too tightly, their hands begin to ache, and what they try to keep only becomes easier to break. The Buddha once taught, "Nothing belongs to you. Even this body will one day leave you." So then what is it you still want to control? Quesky was a renowned potter in the region. People knew him not only for vases as beautiful as a dream, but for the way he made them. As if every turn of the wheel, every hand mark carried a part of meditation. His works had a quiet, profound beauty, as if they were not merely pottery, but the embodiment of a mind tempered through many seasons of fire and clay. In a small house on the village edge, Quesky lived alone with his kiln clay and silence. For him, pottery was not a trade, it was meditation. Each time he put his hands into clay, he breathed deeply and observed his mind. If his heart wavered that day, the clay would warp. If the mind hurried, the glaze would lose its color. Thus, the vases he made were not simply products. They were his mind given form. One day, he received a letter. The sender was the abbot of a distant Zen monastery, a place known for strictness and purity. The abbot wanted to commission a special tea vessel for the mindfulness ceremony of the rains retreat. The requirement was clear: the vessel had to be perfect. No cracks, no deviation, perfectly balanced in both form and energy. Not for decoration, but to represent wakefulness, Quesky knew this was no longer an order. It was a challenge, as if life itself was asking him to face his deepest self. He began to prepare. Choosing the finest clay, he ground it, dried it, kneaded it again, checking moisture by feeling each fiber of earth through his palms. When the clay was ready, he sat at the wheel. He matched each turn with his breath. With every trimming pass, he listened to the sound of metal touching clay. With each layer of glaze, he stirred with a wooden spoon, as if stirring a river. When it came time to fire, the most crucial moment, he hardly took his eyes off the flame. Every hour he checked the color of the fire, adjusted the coals, tilted his ear to hear the clay's faint cracking. He did not sleep through a single night. He was exhausted, yet he forced his mind to remain utterly alert. On the day the vessel came out, there was mist in the air. He opened the kiln door very slowly, hands steady, heart pounding like a father welcoming his first child. And then it appeared. A perfectly rounded, elegant vessel, its glaze shimmering softly like the season's first moon. It was so beautiful that even he could hardly believe he had made it. He didn't dare touch it right away. He sat there gazing at it for hours as if in dialogue with himself. But strangely, his heart felt uneasy. Something gnawed at him, taut and tense. It seemed that the more he tried to reach perfection, the more he feared it would be ruined. With each passing second, his worry grew. On the day he set out to bring the vessel to the monastery, Quesk let no one touch it. He wrapped it in soft cloth and held it to his chest like a treasure. Through the long journey, he neither rested nor dared to set it down. Every rough stretch of road made his heart tighten as the cart jolted. At the monastery gate, he stopped to take a deep breath, but just then, a young novice hurried out not looking and bumped into him. Just a light touch, but enough for the vessel to fall, strike stone, and shatter. Everyone around froze. No one dared speak. Quesk stood there, hands empty, heart clenched. He was numb, not because he had lost a vessel, but because all the effort, sleepless nights, careful guarding meditation had become cold shards of pottery. In that moment, the abbot appeared. He said nothing at first, only bent down to pick up the pieces. Then, in a voice deep and gentle, like the first summer rain, he said, "Sometimes breaking is a new form of completeness." Quesk fell silent. That seemingly simple line made him burst into tears. He understood. For the first time in his life, he truly understood. He had spent his life trying to master outcomes, trying to control everything, believing that with enough technique, persistence, and focus, he could create perfection. But in the instant the vessel broke, he saw clearly. We do not control outcomes. We can only master our mind as we create. From that day on, Quesk was no longer the same potter. He still made pottery, but with each turn, he no longer aimed only at perfection, but at freedom. In every small ripple, he saw the imprint of life. In every crack, he found a lesson in impermanence. And perhaps, from that, the vessels he made became even more silent, even more complete than ever. Quesk's story forces us to face a truth. Most people try to avoid control is an illusion wrapped in fear. We try to control because we fear loss. Yet the obsession that everything must be as we wish throws the mind into anxiety, even when things are still fine. You may be the best in your field. You may pour your whole heart, mind, and time into one thing. as Quesky did with his ceramic vessel. Yet even then, there may be a slight bump, a misstep, an unexpected event, and all that effort can vanish in a moment. If you live only to protect outcomes, you will live in tension. But if you live to be fully present with the process, you will find a peace deeper than success, inner freedom regardless of results. In Buddhism, letting go is not surrender nor carelessness. It is a very subtle practice, throwing yourself fully into the work, but not tying your heart to the outcome. We act with mindfulness, not to control, but to entrust wisely. When results come, favorable or not, we receive them as part of the flow, resisting neither, clinging to none. The Buddha taught, "The wise are those who do the right thing with mindful awareness. Then let the winds of life blow past without being carried away." Imagine you are holding a handful of sand. If you squeeze tight, trying to keep it to control it, the sand slips through your fingers. But if you open your palm and cradle it gently, you still hold the sand without strain. Life is like that. You cannot keep peace by clenching in control. You can only cultivate peace by loosening the mind's grip on results and living wholeheartedly with each breath, each action, each moment. Sometimes what you are trying so hard to keep is exactly what is weighing you down. And when you know how to let go at the right time, you lose nothing. You simply regain yourself. The lesson from Quesky's vessel is not just for potters. It is a mirror for all of us. Parents, leaders, lovers, those trying to control children, work relationships, or even our own future. In a turbulent world, our first instinct is to grasp, to protect, to stay safe, to guarantee outcomes. But ironically, the tighter we hold, the more we lose what we're holding. The only thing you can truly control is not other people, not outcomes, not the current of life, but the quality of your mind in this moment. Is that mind tense or at ease? Is it full of trust and presence, or is it carried away by anxiety, craving, and expectation? A simple yet deep practice every morning. Spend 10 minutes in quiet meditation just to ask one question. What am I holding too tightly? It might be an old fear, a self-image, a person you want to change, or a result you are not ready to release. Simply look at it directly, without judgment, and you have already begun the path of letting go. Or simpler still, when you wash dishes, make tea, wipe the table, fold clothes, place your full attention on that act. Don't think about what comes after. Don't calculate what's next. Do it well. Do it with quiet. Then let the result arrive on its own. That is not laziness or resignation. It is a mindful way of living, not letting results dictate the value of the present. A scientific study from Yale University shows people who can accept what lies beyond their control have anxiety levels up to 30% lower than those who constantly try to control everything. That is, letting go is not only a spiritual quality, but also a practical way to protect mental health, keeping the mind from being weighed down by things that were never ours to begin with. You can start today. Ask yourself, what if I set it down would make me feel lighter? There is a very quiet kind of suffering, not as loud as a breakup, not as fierce as loss, but smoldering, lingering, and wearing down the soul in its own way. It is the pain of no longer being yourself, when you can no longer do what you love, no longer live with your talent, passion, or inner voice. Many people once shone brightly, but because of an incident, a wound, or a rejection. They let go of their true self. They survive, but they do not live truly. They exist, but they do not sing. The Buddha once said, "Rely on yourself as your refuge. No one else can do that for you." And when you lose the deep voice within you, also lose the bridge between yourself and life. Long ago, in a small village tucked at the foot of a misty mountain range, there was a wandering musician named Yamato. He had no home, no family, no possessions, except an old bamboo flute. But to the villagers, Yamato was not a poor man. He was the light of each morning, the warmth of long winter nights, the one who told stories through music when words were no longer enough. Yamato's flute was more than melody. It touched the deepest places of the human heart. When he played beneath the old tree at the village crossroads, children stopped their games, elders paused their knitting, adults left their conversations unfinished, all just to listen in silence. No one said it out loud, but everyone felt it. Those sounds quietly soothed the wounds they had never shared and named the sorrows they had hidden their entire lives. Yamato did not talk much. He only smiled and nodded to everyone passing by. To him, the flute was his only friend, his way of existing in this world. Not to be known, but to belong. Then, one summer day, as Yamato was playing a sad tune under the familiar tree, a group of imperial soldiers rode through the village. Among them was a young official, arrogant in bearing, wearing a gold-embroidered silk cloak eyes that never looked down. Hearing the flute, he stopped and frowned. "What kind of music is this?" he asked, not hiding his disdain. Gloomy backward, bringing nothing but melancholy. No one dared speak. The villagers lowered their heads. Yamato kept playing unbroken, as if the wind could sweep the fields, but could not extinguish the melody within him. The young official said nothing more. He stepped forward, snatched the flute from Yamato's hands, and before the village's stunned eyes, snapped it in two. The crack echoed in the silence, as if something more sacred than the flute had been broken. Yamato did not cry. He bowed deeply, said nothing, and walked away. From that day, he disappeared. No one saw him playing by the old tree anymore. Some elders would now and then remark, "Tonight is so quiet." But life went on. Children grew up not knowing who Yamato was. The old tree turned desolate. The flute was forgotten, like a faded dream in the village's memory. Time passed. The village prospered. New houses rose. The young spoke of trade and schooling. No one mentioned the old flute. Until one summer night when lightning struck the mountainside forest and fire spread like a wild, unbound creature. Shouts rang out. People ran in panic, searching for water for a way out. In the chaos, a strange sound rose. A flute. Not the sad tune of the past, but a driving, powerful melody, as if someone were awakening the whole hill. The villagers stopped bewildered. The melody seemed to lead the way, and they followed. Under the dim moon, the flute sounded from the hilltop, where an old, seldom visited hut once stood. By following that sound, the villagers found a path to safety. After that night, Yamato was spoken of again. Some elders said it was him. Some young people asked, who? And then during later floods, storms, even small quakes, it was the same the flute sounded before the calamity. Each time, the villagers were saved. Gradually, Yamato became a living legend. A village boy, bright and compassionate, resolved to find Yamato. He climbed the hill along the old paths to the little hut overgrown with vines. There, beneath a slanting thatch roof, sat an old man with silver hair, repairing a flute with trembling hands. It was the same flute. Though broken, he had bound the two halves together with a thin copper wire, so fine only a keen eye could see it. It was no longer straight or beautiful, but it produced a marvelous sound carrying farther than ever. The boy asked, "Why don't you make a new flute?" Yamato looked at him, his eyes shining like morning dew. "Because music doesn't come from the flute," he said softly. "It comes from a heart that dares to hurt and still resonate." That line spread through the village, becoming a way to live. People began to understand what has been broken, if mended with patience and love, can become stronger than before. When someone lost their trust, they remembered that flute. When families fell apart, when dreams shattered, when youth lost its way, people remembered Yamato. They remembered that a break is not an ending, but the starting point of a deeper sound. And if you pass that village on a moonlit night, you might hear, in the wind, a fragile yet steadfast melody. That is not only a flute. It is the heart of someone who chose to resonate instead of be silent. And that lesson is what the whole world needs now more than ever. Yamato's story is not just a sad Zen tale. It is living proof of one of the deepest truths the Buddha taught. When the mind still shines, everything remains intact, even when the form is in pieces. Yamato's flute was broken, but more important is this music does not come from the instrument. Music is the echo of a heart that dares to keep sounding even after being wounded. If you think only when everything is perfect can you do something meaningful, then you are letting a dangerous bias control your life. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha taught the mind precedes all things. The mind is chief. The mind shapes them. Yamato did not lose the ability to play. What he lost temporarily was faith in his inner voice. The harsh criticism of someone who didn't understand and an act of destruction that seemed small were enough to silence him. That can happen to any of us. Maybe you were belittled. Maybe someone you trusted dismissed your talent. And you went quiet, not because you lacked ability, but because you were no longer sure you had the right to speak. But Yamato did not live in silence forever. When he let go of the need for recognition, the flute sounded again stronger and wider because it no longer played for himself, but for others. When fire raged, when floods came, that music became a guide. And strangely, the old flute, once broken, carried farther than before. Because now it was the sound of a heart that had shattered and still opened. Imagine you are a mirror, and the mirror is cracked. Your first thought is that it has lost its value. But no, it can still reflect light. And sometimes, the very cracks scatter the light into many rays, creating a truer, deeper picture. You don't need to be perfect to be a light. You only need to be honest about your wounds. Light does not shine only across unbroken surfaces. It threads through the deepest fractures. Yamato became the village's flute, not because he tried to become an artist again. He simply became himself again. And that is the most beautiful music. No one can take away your light unless you start believing you have nothing left to give. Yamato once thought that when the flute broke, he lost the ability to make music. But the truth is, the flute is only a means. What creates true music is not the instrument, but the heart of the one who plays. It is Yamato's compassion, sincerity, and quiet love that made the music ring, not merely the flute's sound. In life, you may lose many things: a job that once defined you, a body that was once strong, a voice once full of confidence, or a person who once meant everything. But if you still keep a small shard of light in your heart, a soft part that still knows how to love, to give, to be moved, then you have not truly lost anything. Modern neuroscience also shows people who continue to practice what they love, even only in imagination or in the smallest acts, writing a few lines, singing a short phrase, sketching a rough line, brewing a cup of tea with their whole heart, activate brain regions tied to positive emotion connection and self-healing. This means you don't have to shine like before to be healed. You only need not to abandon yourself. If you once loved something, don't wait for the world to give you permission to return. Don't wait for everything to be perfect before you begin, because there will never be a perfect moment. Begin again with one small act, an imperfect song, a poem with uneven rhymes, a drawing from a trembling hand, one gentle step toward peace. That is the new flute, and you are still the flute player you have always been. Have you ever tried to control everything, only to find that the more you control, the more tangled things become? We often mistake that if we have enough power, enough reason, enough methods, we can make people behave exactly as we wish and make everything unfold as we arrange. But life still jumps. The tracks people still live according to their natural temperament, and the more we force, the more resistance arises. The Buddha once taught water naturally flows down a slope. The wise do not block the water. They follow the current to understand its path. Enlightenment is not found in controlling the flow, but in observing, understanding, and acting in harmony with the natural laws of all things. The following story is a profound illustration of that lesson. When a leader thought he could impose order from the outside without understanding the inner workings, in an ancient village in the northern mountains where morning mist often covered the stone-paved roads, there was an official named Chen who had just been appointed village head. He had lived many years in the capital, accustomed to ruling through strict laws, clear discipline, and absolute faith in order derived from power. With broad learning and rich governing experience, he believed that if a community had a tough leader and strict adherence to law, it would run smoothly like a machine. Upon taking office, the first thing Chen did was reform the village hall, where people gathered to discuss work, hold rituals, or celebrate the harvest. He rearranged all the seating, set the benches in a U shape, and right in the center on a wooden platform higher than the rest, he placed a large chair made of precious wood, covered in dark red cloth, embroidered with dragons and phoenixes. This was the village head's chair for him alone. Chen believed that if the people saw authority displayed before their eyes at every meeting, they would respect it, fall silent, listen, and obey. The first meeting under Chen's leadership was held on an early winter morning. The village air still smelled of cooking smoke. When Chen entered, walking with imposing, bearing his long robe brushing the floor, The villagers all stood and looked toward the large chair. He sat down in silence. The whole hall felt compressed. No whisper, no eyes dared look straight ahead. People sat with heads lowered, hands on their knees, as if they were in a court hearing. Chen felt satisfied. Throughout the meeting, he spoke at length. He presented reform plans, new regulations, punishments for late taxes, for illegal gatherings, for failing to clean village roads. But absolutely no one spoke up. No comments, no objections. Chen took that as a good sign, evidence that discipline was being established. Yet in the weeks that followed, something strange happened. Attendance at meetings declined. First, the elders were absent, then the women, then the youth. The hall grew emptier. Communal tasks like clearing irrigation ditches, repairing roads, or collective harvesting stalled. Villagers began doing their own things in their own ways, avoiding contact with the village administration. They did not protest, but they did not participate. Chen grew puzzled. He ordered inspections, even reminded households one by one, but no one openly resisted. They only nodded, smiled faintly, and continued in silence as before. It was as if he was governing shadows, not living people. One day, Chen visited the old temple at the edge of the village, where he had heard an elderly Zen master often received visitors under a sala tree. He did not really believe in what he called the vague lifestyle of monastics. But that day, out of curiosity and frustration, he went. The master sat there beneath the old canopy, eyes half closed, teacup in hand, face at ease as if nothing in the world could trouble him. Chen approached and spoke. "I am the village head. I have laws, a position, the highest seat in the village. But the people don't listen. They don't respect me." "Why?" The master opened his eyes and looked at the sky. He pointed toward a flock of birds swooping down the far slope. "Do you see me using ropes to make birds fly in formation?" Chen was briefly startled, and before he could answer, the master continued. "Order does not come from arranging chairs. It comes from trust. When you sit on a high seat, you cannot see others, and they cannot see your heart. That distance does not create respect. It creates caution. You are speaking, but no one dares to listen with their heart." Chen fell silent. For the first time in his years as an official, he had nothing to refute. That evening, he sat alone in the hall. The large wooden chair draped in red stood solitary in the space. Chen walked over, placed his hand on its arm. Then, with a quiet but decisive act, he ordered it removed. At the next meeting, Chen sat on a wooden chair like everyone else at the same level. No higher, no red cloth, no platform. Then in the quiet, an elder timidly raised a hand. "Village head, I have something to suggest." Chen looked at the elder, nodded gently. "Please go ahead." And from that moment, the first real meeting began. Not with power, but with listening. The village slowly came back to life. People returned to the meetings. They offered suggestions, discussed, even debated heatedly at times. But Chen no longer saw it as chaos. He understood true order does not lie in silence, but in unforced harmony. And the old chair from that day was taken to the temple, placed under the sala tree, where people sat in silent meditation without a word yet, with full understanding in their hearts. Chen's story is not only a reminder about power, but more deeply, a lesson about pride and ego. When a person begins to believe that their position defines their value, the ego has quietly stepped in and taken the center seat of consciousness. And when the ego occupies that place, all genuine connection begins to fracture. You no longer see others as human beings, but as lower ranks, to be controlled, to obey. Thus, a person in power becomes the loneliest one in a room full of people. The Buddha taught that conceit is one of the roots of suffering because it creates boundaries between people and between us and the world around us. A true leader need not raise their voice to be heard. They are respected not for their title, but for their virtue. Not for a high seat, but for a heart deep enough. Imagine a stream winding through a deep forest. It needs no one to lead it and no one to block it, because it knows the way. But if someone builds a wall across it, hoping the water will stop and submit, the result will be flooding or drying up. Conversely, if that person understands the flow, knows where to place stones, where to dig small channels, the stream still runs, but in the right direction. Not forced, but guided. People are the same. When you try to control others by imposing your will, they will resist or quietly withdraw. But if you understand their hearts, what they fear, what they need, what helps them feel heard, you can guide them gently, like the wise guide water, not block it. A good leader does not build walls. They dig channels. They do not speak loudly. They listen. And it is precisely that softness which is real strength, the kind that keeps a community together, not with the rope of commands, but with the thread of understanding. In daily life, you might lead a team, a family, an organization, or simply be the older one in a relationship. From that place, you may think you need to set rules, keep control to keep things on course. But ask yourself if those rules are not built on listening and empathy. Are they guiding or dividing? The truth is relationships do not need domination. They need connection. When you sit on high, you may see broadly, but you will not see another's heart. To understand someone, you must sit down beside them. The Buddha taught one who knows how to listen is one who is sowing seeds of compassion. And compassion is not weakness. It is the only strength powerful enough to melt resistance in another's heart. A Harvard University study once pointed out something interesting. When leaders choose to sit at the same height as the person opposite them, rather than higher levels of trust and openness increase by up to 34%. Just a small change in form, but a major shift in emotion. This shows when bodies are close, hearts open more easily to one another. So next time before you give orders, try asking a question. Before you stand above, try sitting beside. Not to lose your position, but to gain connection. And in connection, you do not only lead, you walk together. There are nights when you lie awake not because you are in pain, but because you are afraid you will be. Not because you are hungry, but because you fear you will lack. The human mind has a powerful habit, living in assumptions about the future. Each day we face not only reality, but also carry an extra layer of what if that we ourselves create. In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha taught one who lives with doubt and worry is like a person looking at the sun through smoke. Everything is hazy and unclear. When the mind is restless, even the scene before our eyes is tinted dark. The event has not yet arrived, but fear already reigns. And the sad thing is, the more we worry, the less capable we are of handling it if it truly happens. Are you living like that, straining to control a future that has not yet come? If so, listen with me to the story of Ichiro, a Japanese farmer, and how he learned the most precious lesson about resting in the present. In a remote northern mountain region, where fog often covered the path each early morning, and the wind through the bamboo groves sounded like time whispering, there lived a farmer named Ichiro. His life was simple. Each day the same, rising before dawn, carrying his hoe to a small field on the hillside, quietly tilling the soil, planting seedlings, hauling water to irrigate each row of rice. It was the plot passed down by his ancestors, not large, but enough to feed his family each season. But that year's summer was harsher than usual. No rain fell for over a month. The ground cracked like an old person's skin. The channels that carried water down from the mountains ran dry stones exposed like parched wounds. Villagers whispered about a failed harvest. Some households had sold their buffalo. Some left to find work far away. Ichiro began to lose sleep. At night, he tossed and turned, eyes wide open in the dark. He thought about his field, about the rice withering under the sun, about his son in the last year of school. Would the boy have to drop out if the harvest failed? He thought of the coming winter, cold arriving to an empty stomach. Would he manage? Those thoughts were like weeds. The more he tried to pull them, the more they spread. Sometimes he would be eating chopsticks in hand, while his mind wandered to next month. Some days, he held the watering can, the water already gone, and still stood staring at the field, unable to remember what he was doing. One early morning before sunrise, Ichiro put on his conical hat and quietly took the path through the thickets, up to a small temple on the hilltop. The temple was not large, had few Buddha statues, and no thick clouds of incense. But everyone in the village knew. The Zen master Haruki lived there. An old man around 70, beard white as clouds, eyes bright as if he could see into a person's mind. Ichiro did not know why he had come. He only felt that if he did nothing, his mind would explode. He sat on the porch without speaking. After a while, Master Haruki came out holding a teapot and slowly poured water into 2 wooden bowls. He did not ask why, did not offer greetings, simply placed 1 bowl before Ichiro. After a time, Ichiro spoke, his voice hoarse, as if each word were a stone he had to cough up from his chest. Master, I can't stop worrying. I water the field every day. I pray for rain. I try. But my mind runs in circles like a wild horse without a bridle. I'm afraid. I worry. I feel helpless. The master looked at him for a moment, said nothing. Then he slowly stood, went inside, and brought out an earthen bowl and a full jug of water. He filled the bowl to the brim and handed it to Ichiro. Take this bowl of water, walk from here across the garden around the Bodhi tree, and come back. But remember, do not spill a single drop. If you spill, start over. Ichiro looked at the bowl, then at the garden. A stone path winding with tree roots pushing up through the surface. He was about to ask what use this was, but the master's eyes kept him silent. Ichiro carefully took the bowl, holding it tightly with both hands, his eyes fixed on the surface, so much so that he paid attention to nothing else. One step, then another. A breeze brushed his neck. Leaves fell on his shoulder. A butterfly passed in front of his face. But Ichiro did not look. For the first time in weeks, his mind did only one thing: keep the bowl steady. Midway, a root made him stumble. The water rippled and spilled. He stopped, exhaled, returned. The master said nothing, only refilled the bowl. A second time, a third, a fourth. At last, after many returns, Ichiro completed the circuit without spilling a drop. He set the bowl before the master and exhaled, as if a stone had been lifted from his chest. Strange master? The whole way, I didn't think about the field, the harvest, or even my fear that my son would have to quit school. I thought of only one thing keeping the bowl steady. Everything else, suddenly, disappeared. Master Haruki looked at him and smiled as if he had been waiting for that answer. That is the path, Ichiro. Your mind, pulled toward the past and sucked into the future, stopped today. When the mind focuses on one thing in the present, worry has nowhere to cling. Your mind is like that bowl of water. If you hold it with mindfulness, it will not tip from the winds of fear. Ichiro was silent. He sat for a long time, looking out at the garden. For the first time, he noticed the birdsong in the Bodhi tree, the gentle scent of wildflowers around the temple, the sunlight shimmering on the water in the bowl before him. No one promised him that rain would come. No one said his rice would be saved. But something had changed. Not in the field, but in his heart. From that morning, Ichiro went on with his work as before, the same tasks as always. But he learned how to keep his mind from being entangled by what had not yet happened. He learned to water as if there were only the act of watering. He learned to eat as if there were only rice in his hands. Whenever his mind started to run toward the future, he returned to his own bowl of water, the present. Ichiro's story is not only a beautiful lesson in mindfulness, it is also a wake-up call for all of us living in the age of anxiety, an era where upon opening our eyes in the morning, the mind is pulled into dozens of scenarios that have not happened: bills, unpaid emails, unsent goals, unmet failures, not yet arrived, but already feared. Thus, much of today's suffering does not come from reality, but from prediction. Ichiro did not change his circumstances. The drought remained. The field was still dry. But his experience changed completely through one simple practice, pouring full attention into each step, like filling the bowl with water. When the mind pours all its strength into the present, the empty space of the future, where worry lives, disappears. That is the doorway to liberation. Neuroscience supports this as well. Studies show that when people practice mindfulness, the brain regions related to anxiety responses decrease in activity, while the regions related to safety, presence, and love are activated. This does not come from mythology, but from biology. And the Zen story of the empty boat is like a mirror stripping bare the modern mind. We are not angry because of circumstances, but because of our thoughts about circumstances. When an empty boat drifts into us, no one gets angry. But if we believe someone did this to me on purpose, anger flares like fire meeting wind. The problem is not the boat, but what our mind places on it. So if you are worried, ask yourself, is there really someone in that boat, or is it just a shadow in my mind? If you can see that in that moment, you are no longer being pushed along. You are rowing again. Peace is not ahead, it is here, where you are truly present. The lesson from Ichiro is not just a lovely story or a philosophy to ponder in spare moments. It is a wake-up call, that awareness is not far off. It is a life skill needed, so we are not drowned by the invisible pressures of modern life. Mindfulness is not only for those sitting still in meditation halls, but for those standing in long lines at the supermarket, driving in rush hour, or cleaning the kitchen after a tiring day. Begin with small things. When washing your hands, only wash your hands. Feel the water running through your fingers instead of letting your mind run to unanswered emails. When eating, only eat. Don't let dinner become a place to keep working or arguing in your head. When worry rises instead of being swept away, pause, take a deep breath, and whisper, "I am here." Research from Harvard University shows that for 47% of the time, people are not actually living in the present moment, and that very fact makes them less happy. That is not a harmless number. It is evidence that the mind's wandering is a deep cause of life's seeming lack of fulfillment. But the good news is, you can be happier right now, without waiting for someone to change, without needing circumstances to improve. Just return to where you are standing and live fully with it. Because if you miss this moment, you are missing your very life. And as you can see, Ichiro found peace not through a prophecy about the future, but through a very ordinary bowl of water. Peace arrives when we release the need to control and live with what is here. But if the future brings fear, the past holds much regret. Some people carry a boulder of old mistakes in their hearts, unable to set it down, and that precisely keeps them from taking a step forward. There are mistakes in life that torment us to the core. Even after time has passed, our hearts twist every time we remember. We ask ourselves, if only I had done things differently back then. If only I had stopped before causing harm. And so those if onlys become a boulder that weighs on our soul for years. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha taught, one who knows they have erred feels shame, and corrects themselves has already begun walking the bright path. The question is not how to never make mistakes, but after a mistake, do we choose to carry it or set it down so it can transform? The story of a former soldier named Dogen, who passed through war and through the hell inside his own heart, will help you understand this more clearly. Dogen had once been a warrior. In his youth, he was not someone who sat quietly beneath a temple eave or listened to the bell at dawn. He was a man of fire and iron, a man with a rifle on his shoulder, a sword at his hip, and a heart wrapped in discipline. He fought under the nation's flag, lived amid the sounds of bombs and bullets, and followed orders he could not refuse, even when they went against his conscience. Once in the middle of a brutal skirmish in a small border village, when everything was smoke, flames, and screams, he unintentionally caused the death of a child. Not an enemy, not a soldier, just a child standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. Wide-eyed, a small body among rushing feet and soulless gunfire. That death, though no one blamed him, carved an indelible mark in his mind. No medal could cover those eyes. No praise could lighten the burden he carried inside. The war ended. People called him a hero. Newspapers wrote about him with shiny words, brave, valiant, self-sacrificing. But they didn't know that beneath the uniform was a broken soul, Night after night, he couldn't sleep dreaming he had returned to that village. He heard the child's footsteps running, but never reaching. Years later, no one mentioned Dogen anymore. He disappeared from the city, withdrew from all glory. Some rumored he had gone abroad. Some said he had died. The truth was, Dogen had gone to a remote mountain temple, a place with no cell service, no honking horns, and certainly no one who knew who he was. He spoke little. On his first day, he only asked to stay and do temple chores, sweep the courtyard, carry water, tend the vegetable garden. No walking meditation, no chanting. He worked quietly, like a shadow. The monks saw his diligence and left him be asking nothing about his past. But they began to notice something strange. Every morning before sunrise, Dogen went to the stream, chose a large stone, hoisted it onto his shoulder, and carried it to the center of the meditation yard. By evening, he carried that same stone back to its place by the stream. Day after day. Rain or sunstorm or fog, he never skipped a day. At first, everyone thought he might be training his body. But as months passed, as his shoulders drooped, his back bent, and the furrows deepened on his brow, they realized this was not merely muscle training. Something inside him was heavier than that stone. One day, the abbot, an octogenarian with eyes that seemed to see through to a person's heart, watched Dogen from afar. When he came closer and saw Dogen set the stone down in the yard, panting eyes resolute, the master gently asked, "What are you doing?" Dogen looked straight at the old monk, his voice low but firm. "I am learning to carry a boulder without being crushed by it." The master smiled softly. He said nothing more. No sermon, no judgment. He simply turned and walked away, leaving a deep stillness in the air. The next morning, for the first time in many months, the stone remained by the stream. The meditation yard was empty. Dogen no longer carried it. Instead, he sat on the steps, hands wrapped around a cup of hot tea, eyes gazing toward the pine forest. The heaviness was gone from his face. His eyes were still somber, but it was a sadness that had been accepted. The master approached without asking. Dogen turned and spoke first. "I'm not carrying the stone anymore. Because at last, I understand. This burden does not require me to bear it for life." The old monk nodded and slowly placed a hand on his shoulder. "No stone grows lighter because you resent it, but it will no longer weigh on you if you learn to set it down." From that day, Dogen stopped carrying the stone. But he still rose early, still swept the yard, still hauled water. One thing changed. He began to smile at those around him. At times, he sat in meditation by the stream, where the stone had been, as if to remind himself letting go is not forgetting, but no longer letting the past control the present. No one recorded Dogen's story in a book, but those who stayed at that temple said they had never seen someone shoulder such a heavy stone and never seen anyone set it down so gently. Dogen's story is living proof of a Buddhist truth. Suffering does not lie in having erred, but in refusing to learn from the error and put it down. Some mistakes cannot be erased. Some memories resurface at night no matter how much we want to forget. But what makes you suffer is not the mistake itself. It is the way you hold it like a sentence without parole. Like Dogen, many of us carry the boulders of the past on our shoulders each day, thinking that if we put them down, we are abandoning responsibility or conscience. Yet the Buddha taught that awakening is not imprisoning ourselves in the past, but learning to look straight at it with compassion, not to deny it, but to understand and transform it. We do not need to erase what was wrong, but we can learn to walk without letting it press us down. Should a person who wants to swim across a stream keep clutching a rock, Dogen lifted the stone each day, as if it were a ritual of penance. But one day, he realized remorse is not lifelong self-punishment. It is the starting point of self-healing. And healing requires courage. The courage to forgive yourself. The courage to understand, I am not letting go because I don't care, but because I have learned the lesson. Imagine how many around you live this way. Accomplished kind, yet hearts heavy with something no one knows. They don't cry, they don't speak, but every action, every night's sleep, every relationship is affected by invisible boulders. The question is, how long will you carry yours? Letting go is not an ending. It is the beginning of a new kind of responsibility, living better because of the old lesson. None of us were born to be perfect, but each of us has the right to begin again, with a lighter heart and hands no longer gripping pain. Buddhist teaching is clear. No one saves us but ourselves. This is not condemnation. It is an awakening truth. No master, no loved one, no deity can carry for you the pain you refuse to face. And compassion for yourself does not mean erasing mistakes or fleeing responsibility. In Buddhism, compassion is the capacity to look deeply, to understand the causes, and from there, to transform. Regret without the light of mindfulness becomes a swamp. But if you will sit down, slow your breath, and simply name the feeling present, this is regret. I am feeling it. That act itself is a first step in healing. No need to avoid it. No need to explain it away. Just be present. A Stanford University study once showed that writing down the things you regret and then burning the paper can reduce cortisol, the stress hormone, by up to 23%. This shows that our body and mind are waiting for a signal of release. And you are the one who can create that signal. Regret need not become a chain. It can become a seed of compassion if you tend it with breath and mindfulness. Self-forgiveness, according to modern science, is not a privilege for the strong, but a skill. And skills can be learned and practiced day by day. You begin learning it by stopping and bravely naming your pain. Dogen's boulder did not vanish. It still lay there by the stream, a silent witness to his growth. But he was no longer the one carrying it up each day. That says one thing. You can carry the past without being controlled by it. In life, sometimes just a small mistake is enough to leave you restless for many days. A slip of the tongue, a careless action, a brief moment of neglect, and then you carry it with you like an invisible debt. Have you ever felt that way? As if you were carrying a broken pot on your back, no longer usable, yet you cannot bring yourself to throw it away. There is an old Zen saying, "The mirror does not keep the image of a stain once it has been wiped clean." The mind is the same. Do not hold on to what is already past. The problem is, we do not just keep it. We cling to it tightly as if it were part of our identity. We punish ourselves with repeated recollections. And instead of moving forward, we stay stuck, standing before a mistake that can no longer be undone. So how do we learn to let go? How do we forgive ourselves? not just with reason, but with deep and gentle understanding in the heart. The story of Mariko the cook and the broken pot will help you listen to the answer. In a monastery, hidden high on a mountain peak, where the morning mist quietly drifted past moss-covered rooftops, there lived a woman named Mariko. She was not a Zen master, nor a student seeking enlightenment. She was simply a cook, the one who quietly prepared meals for the entire community for more than 10 years. Mariko lived simply, almost invisible in the rhythm of monastery life. Each morning she rose before the mindfulness bell, lit the wood stove, washed vegetables in ice-cold water, then seasoned each pot of porridge, each piece of tofu, each pickled radish with rare care. Everyone believed that if food carried the energy of the one who cooked it, then Mariko was the one who planted peace into every bowl of rice. She had never made a mistake. Even in the smallest details, kitchen towels always folded neatly, lids always placed in the right spot, and her timing never off by even half a bell, until one winter morning. The wind blew stronger than usual. Fog was so thick that faces could not be seen when crossing the courtyard. Mariko, as always, carried a pot of hot porridge from the kitchen to the meditation hall in time for the morning practice. But this time, the stone steps were damp and slippery. As she stepped down, her foot slipped. She could not cry out in time. The large pot flew from her hands, crashing onto the stone ground. A sharp sound rang out like metal colliding with memory. The pot broke. Porridge splattered everywhere, steaming into the freezing air. A few monks stopped and glanced back. Others quietly folded their sleeves, saying nothing. Mariko stood there, frozen like stone in the mist, her face pale, eyes wide open, unblinking. Then, like a machine, she bent down, gathering the shards, wiping every splash of porridge with her already soaked cloth. Not a word, not a tear. Yet everyone could feel something inside her had shattered with the pot. From that day on, Mariko was no longer the same. She still worked, still cooked, still folded towels, still lit the fire, but it was as if a pane of glass stood between her and the world. No more laughter, no more eye contact. She avoided conversations and always asked to cook side dishes instead. No one blamed her, but her silence only made others more uneasy. The abbot, who had lived in the monastery for more than 30 winters, observed her each day, but did not rush to speak. He understood. Some wounds, the more you touch too soon, the deeper they sink. Weeks later, on a quiet afternoon, tea when most of the winter leaves had fallen and the sky held only pale white, the abbot called Mariko to the meditation hall. The tea table was prepared, 2 thin cushions facing each other, a ceramic teapot steaming gently. Mariko sat, head-bowed, hands placed properly on her lap. The abbot poured tea, then looked at her and asked softly, "That broken pot, is it still in your heart?" Mariko lifted her eyes. They were red, brimming with tears. She said nothing, but her gaze answered everything. The abbot smiled as if he had expected it. Then he pulled from his sleeve a small, ivory-colored porcelain cup and placed it on the mat between them. "Drop this cup." Mariko hesitated. "But that is your cup. It's all right. Just let it fall." Silence filled the room. Finally, Mariko's trembling hands lifted the cup, then let go. A sharp crack echoed. The cup shattered. Pieces scattered across the cold floor. Mariko panicked, bending down to gather them, lips pressed tightly together. The abbot asked gently, "Can you put it back together now?" no master. I cannot. And if you keep holding it in your hands, clinging to each shard as if it were an unforgivable mistake, how will you cook again? How will you smile again? Mariko broke down in tears. Silent sobs, but tears fell quietly onto the broken cup. She held her hands close to her chest, as if embracing the pain she had long refused to face. Master, I fear that if I let it go, I will become irresponsible, as if I belittle my mistake. The abbot nodded, eyes calm as a still lake. Many people think so. That holding on to mistakes proves they have a conscience. But child-carrying guilt does not make you noble. It only makes you weary. Forgiveness is not forgetting. Forgiveness is facing it and admitting it happened, and then choosing to live on without letting it define your whole being. He handed her a cloth. Wipe your hands, then sit and drink tea with me. Tonight, I want to eat porridge cooked by you just as before. Mariko hesitated. She looked at the broken cup on the floor, then at the abbot. His eyes held no blame, no lecture, no judgment, only presence. And in that moment, she understood the broken pot of porridge never needed to be replaced, never needed to be fixed, never needed to be forgotten. It only needed to be set down. And so she nodded. The story of Mariko and the broken pot, seemingly just a small mishap in monastery life, holds a profound message that can touch the heart of anyone who has quietly lived with regret. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha taught contemplate the body in the body, feelings in feelings, mind in mind, and phenomena in phenomena. This means do not just look at actions or surface emotions, but turn inward and look deeply into your own mind, not to judge or criticize, but to recognize, to understand, and from there to let go. Mariko was not truly suffering because of the fallen pot. What caused her to shrink back and lose her laughter was the identity of being the one who dropped the pot, a label she glued onto herself, one she could not peel off. That was more painful than the fall itself, more piercing than the sound of shattering porcelain. It was the breaking inside her mind. In modern life, many live like Mariko, weighed down by a past mistake, an error at work, an action that once hurt someone. They believe clinging to regret proves they are responsible. They confuse remembering with being stuck. Like a man standing by a lake trying to fix his reflection on rippling water caused by the wind, many try to correct their outer image without realizing the root is the lake their heart still disturbed. As long as inner waves rise from guilt, you will never see your true reflection. Modern neuroscience has confirmed this. Researchers at the University of Wisconsin-Madison found that when you repeatedly recall a past mistake with negative emotion, the brain reacts as if it is happening again. Stress hormones like cortisol increase, weakening the immune system and disrupting emotions. But when you revisit the memory with mindfulness, with calm observation, without judgment, without escape, the brain gradually cools down. The amygdala, the center for fear and negative emotions, reduces its activity, like a lake settling into stillness. That is why when the abbot asked Mariko, "Is the broken pot still in your heart?" it was not an ordinary question. It was a reminder: if you still hold it like a shard of porcelain inside your chest, you will never again hold the ladle to cook. If you keep clinging to the fragments of the past without setting them down, how can your hands receive what is new? Letting go does not mean forgetting. It does not mean denying mistakes. It is a courageous act of setting down what no longer needs to be carried. Forgiving yourself is not compromise. It is the first step toward healing. You can begin with a breath. I know this mistake happened, but I do not need to live with it anymore. And then you set it down gently as Mariko set down the shattered cup. No need to glue it back. No need to act as if nothing happened. Just recognize it broke, and the only thing left is to move on, with a heart that learns, that loves, and that forgives. You do not need to be perfect to be worthy of peace. You only need honesty and enough awareness not to let mistakes become chains that imprison you. When you look at the past with the light of understanding, regret no longer drags you down. It becomes a seed of compassion sprouting in the present. Sometimes forgiveness does not come from others. It begins with you when you learn to touch the truth and then let go. Have you ever wondered why some losses break a person completely, while others go through the very same loss, yet remain strangely calm and at peace? Is it because they feel less pain? Or is it because they see differently, perceive differently from the very roots of their mind? In the Dhammapada, the Buddha taught, "Nothing belongs to me. Therefore, when it is lost, it is not truly lost." The words sound simple, but in real life, when everything you've built is swept away in a blink, how many could calmly say it was never mine? We often tie our self-worth to what we own, houses, reputation, achievements, until the floods of life come and wash it all away. And it is in that moment we realize what hurts most is not what we have lost, but the clinging inside us. The following story is a vivid illustration of this truth. I was once asked, when a person has lost everything, what is left to live for? At first, it sounds like despair, but sometimes it is only when we have nothing left to hold on to that we can finally see what truly belongs to us. This is the story of Fujiwara, a wealthy merchant who once held a prosperous region in his hands and then lost everything, only to find himself again. Fujiwara lived in the east where rivers nourished fertile fields year-round. Villagers used to say, "If not for Fujiwara's land, our rice would never grow so well." He was not only a skilled trader, but also generous. For years, he quietly helped poor families build homes, gave seeds to new farmers, and never let anyone go hungry through winter. The villagers saw him as an invisible shield. They believed, as long as Fujiwara stood, the village would be safe. But that year, the rains came early. Endless storms. Winds from the north carried black clouds and thunder. Floodwaters rose as never before. The river from the mountains rushed down like the fury of heaven and earth. The dikes broke overnight, and houses, barns, livestock pens were swept away in the icy current. Fujiwara stood on his upper floor, watching his warehouse filled with tools, seeds the wealth of a lifetime vanish like straw in the torrent. Nothing could be saved. Only the roar of water, the crash of wood against rock, and the choking smell of mud remained. The next morning, when the waters receded, the villagers hurried to his home. They feared he would collapse. They feared losing their pillar. Decades of labor now reduced to mud. They expected Fujiwara to scream, to curse the heavens, but he did not. He stood there on wet tiles, eyes gazing at the still swirling river. No anger, no collapse, and not a forced show of strength. close friend who had stood by him for 10 years came near and asked with a breaking voice, "All your effort now washed away. Don't you regret it?" Fujiwara was silent, then softly replied, "I thought like you. Last night when the waters struck the walls, I watched helplessly as everything fell apart. But then I suddenly remembered the words of an old Zen master I once met in my youth. When everything is swept away, only awareness remains. Look closely what is truly yours." From that day, Fujiwara was no longer the busy merchant. He did not rebuild his trade nor restore his warehouses. Instead, he lived among the villagers. Each morning he meditated under the fig tree by the river. Each afternoon he taught the children to read. He helped rebuild small homes, not grand, just warm. He spoke little of what was lost, but at some point, the smile on his face was no longer the smile of a merchant, but of one who had laid down his burden. The villagers stopped calling him Master Fujiwara. They called him the man by the river. He had no more possessions, yet he became their true anchor, not through wealth, but through presence. One day, a child asked him, "Grandfather, if I lose all my toys, I'll be so sad. Why weren't you sad when you lost your house?" Fujiwara bent down, stroked the child's hair, and smiled. "Because I've learned that what flows away is what cannot be kept forever. What never flows away is the peace in your heart. We grow up in a world that teaches us to hold, to gather, to accumulate. And when the floods come not of water, but of loss, of collapse, of separation, we panic because what we held is no longer there. But floods don't only sweep away. They also leave behind. They leave mud for new crops to grow. They leave empty spaces so we can see what we never saw before. And sometimes, like Fujiwara, we need a flood to realize we had never truly lived fully. For only when there is nothing left to hold do we have hands free to give. Only when we have nothing left to defend do we have hearts free to listen." Fujiwara's story is not about praising loss, but reminding us some losses are thresholds to freedom, some collapses are beginnings of new vision, and some letting go which seems like sacrifice is in fact the chance to return to our true nature. So if one day a flood sweeps through your life in any form, do not rush to call it disaster. Stand still, listen, and ask, what is truly mine? Perhaps from the ruins you will rediscover something long forgotten, a life that needs no control, only presence. And that is the lesson from Fujiwara, the man who lost everything to find himself. Fujiwara's story is not really about a generous merchant. That is just the surface. The deeper story is about one who saw through the truth of impermanence. When everything was swept away, wealth, reputation, protection, his mind was not swept along. Not because he was hard, but because he had once observed everything born already carries the seed of its ending. In Buddhist teaching, impermanence is not just a natural law like day and night, birth and death. It is the key to liberation, helping us stop clinging to what was never truly ours forever. What you call mine today, a house, a ring, a love tomorrow, may belong to someone else or vanish without a trace. You are not wrong to cherish them. But the mistake is when you identify yourself with them. Pause and ask if one day you lose what you love most, will you also lose yourself? That is the difference between one who has not seen impermanence and one who has. The one who has not suffers as if a part of themselves has been torn away. The one who has it doesn't mean they do not feel sorrow, but they let go within the sorrow. They accept with awareness, because they understand the nature of all phenomena. Things, relationships is emptiness, like clouds drifting across the sky, beautiful but never to be held. Imagine holding a teacup you treasure. It is tied to a trip, a person, a memory. Then, a small shake, it falls and shatters on the floor. You grieve, not because of the cup itself, but because of the meaning you placed in it. You thought, this cup is part of me. But if you look closer, you'll see from the day you brought it home, the cup already carried the seed of breaking. The invisible crack was not in the porcelain, but in the law of existence. Everything changes, everything decays. Knowing this doesn't make the breaking pleasant, but it makes you less imprisoned by the ego that always hurts when it loses. We don't need to become stone to stop hurting, but we can become sky, letting pain drift by like clouds. Because as Fujiwara understood, some losses are the beginning of awakening. And one who lives with impermanence is one who knows how to let go, even while still loving. From Fujiwara's story, the lesson is not live in poverty. The lesson is live free amid what you have, freedom. Not because there is nothing to lose, but because you are no longer bound by the fear of loss. When you have, cherish. When you lose, understand and let go. It sounds simple, but living this way requires deep inner strength. No one is born with it. Like muscle, it must be trained daily through mindfulness, observation, and meditation. In meditation, each inhale is an acceptance without clinging. Each exhale is a release without resistance. When you sit, close your eyes and simply follow your breath, you are training a vital skill not to be dragged by life even while living fully in it. This practice is not an escape from reality. It is the way to live deeply with reality without being drowned by its changes. That is why the Buddha did not teach us to run from life, but to walk through it without attachment. Harvard research shows that those who practice mindfulness regularly recover from emotional loss twice as fast as those who do not. That is not just statistics. It is a reminder your mind can grow stronger if you train it. So each day, begin with something small. Let go of one thing that no longer fits. It could be an unmet expectation, an object tied to old sorrow, a grudge you've held too long. You don't need to let go of the whole world in one day. Just set down one small weight, and you've stepped closer to freedom. Because those who are light walk far, and those who know how to let go are the ones who truly keep what matters. There are times when you hold a pen but cannot write a single line, not because you lack words, but because the mind is full of echoes of the past and filled with fear of the future. The blank page before you becomes a mirror reflecting the blockage within. In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha taught, "The past is gone, and no more the future has not yet come, and is not real. Only the present is the Dharma that must be contemplated." If you let your mind pile up the already gone and the not yet arrived, how can the present have room to flow? The story of Kenji, a poet who once moved hearts with his words, will show you that when the blank page is silent, it may be the moment the heart is calling to be healed. Kenji was once a renowned poet throughout the region. Each of his poems was like a light yet sharp blade, cutting to the very depths of the reader's heart. He did not use language to show off, but to touch what people had not yet found words for. People said Kenji wrote about sorrow, as if he had lived with it his whole life. But then his life turned to another chapter, empty and silent, when the wife he loved suddenly passed away from a strange illness. Death came quickly, like a gust of wind through a burning house. Kenji had no time to prepare, no farewell, no final glance. On the day he saw her off, he did not cry, did not speak, did not write. From then on, his pen fell silent. The page spread out like a mourning cloth, and he sat there motionless. In the months that followed, Kenji lived like a shadow. He shut his door, received no friends, accepted no invitations from publishers or poetry circles. They came knocking with their expectations, but met only silence. The blank page was no longer a place to sow poetry, but a witness to a soul frozen over. He had once written of the world's sorrows, but this time he could not write his own pain. That autumn, the winds arrived earlier than usual. Kenji put on a thin cloak and quietly left the house. He said nothing, left no note. His steps carried him up the mountainside to a small Zen temple, where he had once listened to teachings in his youth. It was a place of dark brown roof tiles, blazing red maples each fall, and an elderly Zen master whom he deeply respected. When he arrived, Kenji was almost a stranger, thin withdrawn eyes deep and dark like a dry well. The abbot looked at him for a long while, asked nothing, simply pressed his palms together and invited him in. No words were needed. They sat together in the great hall where the late sun slanted through the doorway and dust drifted in the air like tiny raindrops. No bell, no lecture. Only breath sunlight and silence. For the first time in many months, Kenji was not swallowed by grief. He did not see it vanish, but he felt it soften like a wound that stings less once dressed by simple presence. No one consoled him with words yet. That room, that stillness soothed him by its unconditional being there. When the meditation ended, the master turned to Kenji, handed him a blank sheet of paper and an old pen. He did not ask Kenji to write. He only spoke lightly, like the wind. Place the pen on the paper, but don't write words. Just breathe and be present. Kenji was surprised, but he followed. He held the pen and set it on the paper, as if the pen and his hand were part of his breathing. No pressure to write, no expectation to produce something beautiful. Only him and the blank page. His breath began to slow, no longer rushed, no longer clenched. His hand trembled slightly, not from cold, but because something gentle was being awakened. Unexpectedly, a tear fell quietly from the corner of his eye and soaked into the paper. It spread into a round blot, no shape, no word, yet full of meaning. The master looked at the spreading mark, nodded, and smiled. "That is your first poem." Kenji bowed his head, and the tears continued, not from pain, but because for the first time he allowed the pain to breathe. In that moment, he understood he had not lost his ability to make poetry. He had only refused to be present with his own grief. And poetry, like life, can only arise when we are willing to breathe with it, rather than force it into silence. The blank page was no longer a symbol of muteness. It became the place where Kenji began again, not with words, but with honesty. With a single tear brave enough to appear amidst the silence. From then on, he no longer tried to write. He simply lived, breathed, and was present. And the lines of poetry, gentle, simple, began to return. No longer deep cuts, but soft breezes stirring readers' hearts with absolute sincerity. And if anyone asked, how did Kenji learn to write poetry again? The answer is by listening to a tear touch the page. Kenji's story is not about losing talent, but a clear testament to the quiet power of mindfulness. No miracle brought the verses back to him. No magic light suddenly made words appear on the page. Everything began with something very simple, returning to the breath, to the present, to himself. In Buddhist teaching, the mind is likened to a lake. When the water is rippling, it cannot mirror the moon. When the mind is disturbed by fear, regret, and echoes of the past, all creative flow and deep understanding are obscured. But when we learn to sit, breathe softly, and look into the mind with gentleness, that lake begins to settle. And in that stillness, the moon appears. And so do the lines. And so does true life. Imagine you are holding a pen, but the ink cartridge is dry. The more you press force and grow angry, the page stays white. You blame the page, the circumstances, even yourself. But the truth is, the pen simply needs to be refilled. And that does not happen through pressure, but through rest, through quiet, allowing the ink to seep back. Our mind is the same. When Kenji set the pen on the blank page and did not write but only breathed, that was not giving up, it was beginning. A return. An act of courage in choosing to face his pain rather than flee it. And in that very moment, a tear fell like the first drop of ink after a long drought. Not everyone is a poet, but each of us has our own blank pages, silent spaces in the heart after hurt, loss, or exhaustion. And like Kenji, we cannot fill those spaces through effort alone, only through full presence, through breath, through authentic living. That is the power of mindfulness. Quiet yet enough for someone emptied out to begin writing again. You need not be a poet to feel Kenji's story. In truth, all of us have sat before a blank page, not necessarily paper. It could be an early Monday after a crisis, an unsent email, a relationship that has just ended, a dream left unfinished. And there we are, heart overflowing, yet unable to begin. That blank page is not frightening because it is empty, but because it reflects the mind when it is blocked. Like Kenji, you may be holding the pen, but if the heart is shut from loss, exhaustion, or wounds that have not been allowed to breathe, no line will appear. Not because you have nothing to write, but because you have not been gentle enough to listen to yourself. The method the master gave Kenji is so simple, it is often overlooked. Before beginning anything, sit still. Just 5 minutes. Place your hands on the table, on the page, or on whatever marks your beginning. And breathe. No need to write anything. No need to make anything special. Simply be fully with your breath. And the remarkable thing is science is speaking up too. A study at the University of Oxford showed that those who practice mindful writing daily, even for a few minutes, see creativity rise by over 30%, while symptoms of depression drop significantly, especially after emotional shocks. This confirms what Zen masters have known for thousands of years. When you abide in the present, the stream returns. No invitation, no force. You don't need to produce a poem. You only need to live each breath as a poem taking shape. Then the blank page will no longer symbolize fear, but open into the deepest freedom, the freedom to be yourself, even before anything is written. And perhaps, as Kenji realized, the first tear falling on the page is the first poem, wordless, but truer than any line. Kenji found his words again, not through striving, but through release. The blank page became a mirror for his heart, and through it, he learned to live with loss without losing himself. There is something strange about the human mind. The more intelligent and devoted we are, the more easily we get trapped by expectations, especially when we think I'm doing the right thing. Therefore, the result must be right. But life doesn't always work that way. Many people suffer not because they did wrong, but because they cannot accept when results don't match their expectations. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha taught, a mind without attachment is the foundation of freedom. When our mind clings to the ideas that others must change life, must recognize my effort, then no matter how educated, ethical, or well-intentioned we are, we still suffer. That attachment can come from a very pure place like love, an educational ideal, a desire to serve. But without mindfulness, we won't realize that our goodness, when not paired with wisdom, can turn into chains. On a small hillside where the pine forest greets the morning sun and sparrows chirp like a daily ritual, there was a peaceful old village where time seemed to slow down. On the village edge, amid green grass and dirt paths, stood a simple bamboo school. No iron gate, no high walls, just a few small thatched rooms around a red earth courtyard where students played with hand-woven balls and laughter rode on the wind. That school was where Ms. Soma had spent 30 years of her life teaching letters, and more than that, teaching kindness, patience, and how to be a good person. She was not just a teacher. To this village, she was a symbol of dedication, like an old pine standing firm through many stormy seasons. Soma was not wealthy. She was not famous. But anyone who ever studied with her remembered her with uncommon respect. She taught with a gentle voice, clear eyes, and an unshakable belief that education can change a life. Every morning she stepped into class in worn-down sandals, carrying handwritten lesson boards and a smile like sunshine. She used to say, even a small lamp, if it burns long enough, can light an entire village. And for those 30 years, she was that lamp. Generations grew up under that light. Some left the village to become engineers and doctors. Some returned as farmers, mothers, fathers. Some never came back, but somewhere in their lives her voice still echoed a quiet reminder. Then one day on an autumn afternoon, as the sunset fell slantwise across the dirt road to the school, Mrs. Soma quietly left the profession. No drumbeat, no farewell ceremony, only yellow leaves drifting slowly along the classroom eaves. She thought, it's time for the young to carry on this mission. She left behind a simple classroom, a few stacks of old books, and a blackboard, the companion of her 3 decades of teaching. A year later, she returned. The school was still there. The rooms had fresh paint. There were some modern devices. The children no longer went barefoot. They wore sneakers and superhero backpacks. She smiled. Change is inevitable, and she had prepared herself for it. But what stilled her was not the students, not the new teachers, but the blackboard. That board where she had written the first letters for hundreds of children now sat unused. Dust lightly covered its surface. One corner was chipped, and in front of it, a large screen. The new teacher was lecturing from PowerPoint lessons projected by a machine. No more chalk tap-tap. No more voice tracing each stroke. That blackboard, once the soul of the classroom, was now just decoration, something old in a new age. And though she had prepared herself to see everything change, her heart dropped. Not because she disliked modernity. She understood technology was progress, but in that moment, it felt as if part of her heart, the sleepless nights preparing lessons, the evenings carefully writing each line in white chalk, had been dusted over along with the board. She didn't cry, but it felt like someone had closed an important chapter of her life without bothering to read the last page. She stood there, alone, in the fading light. Then an old voice rose from the school gate. "What are you looking at?" She turned. It was an elderly Zen master passing by. He had a kind face, eyes that seemed to listen to what hadn't been said. Ms. Soma answered softly, "I'm looking at the board, the old board I used to teach with. I once thought it would always be used." The master smiled, unhurried, without explaining. He looked at the board as if listening to the stories it had told. Then he said, "Perhaps it's still teaching, just not with white chalk. Sometimes, an empty board is the deepest lesson." Ms. Soma paused. "What lesson, master?" He looked at her, voice light as the evening breeze. "A lesson in letting go, in acceptance, in trusting that nothing you've poured your heart into truly disappears. It only transforms. Like a pine tree shedding needles, it doesn't mean it has died. It's preparing for the next spring." She was silent. That board, it might no longer bear writing, but it had etched itself into countless hearts. And even if it was no longer a teaching tool, it was still teaching through silence. It reminded that everything is impermanent. And precisely because of impermanence, what we give with love is what truly remains. Soma looked at the board once more. This time her heart felt lighter. She bowed as if thanking the board, thanking the years gone by. Then she turned away. On the road home, leaves still fell slowly in the autumn sun. But her steps were lighter, because now she understood some things, even when no longer present, still quietly teach us the most important lessons of life. Soma's story is not just a personal tale of a village teacher. It is a small mirror of a very human longing to see what we've devoted ourselves to continue on in the way we believe is right. Yet in life, what often causes suffering is not loss itself, but our refusal to let go of the form of what once held meaning. Soma did not mourn fame or status. She fell silent when she saw the blackboard, which she had treated as a symbol of dedication and years of teaching left behind. But that very feeling revealed a great lesson. Sometimes we are attached not to the essence, but to the form of the essence. And when that form changes, we feel as if the soul of what we cherished is gone. In the Buddha's teaching, there is a profound truth. All phenomena are impermanent. This means not only people, but every form, every tool, every structure is temporary. This does not diminish their value. It reminds us to use them as means, not ends. The blackboard is a means. The school is a means. The role of teacher is a means. If our mind clings to them, we lose inner freedom and suffering begins. Imagine you tended a garden. You expected it to bloom with crimson roses, but after a rainy season, wild daisies filled with morning light. Will you be disappointed because it didn't follow your plan? Or will you smile because life chose its own way of blooming, not your way? yet still beautiful. So too with your dedication, whether to a person, an organization, or an ideal. It will bear fruit, but that fruit will not always take the shape you expect. And at the meeting point of expectation and reality, suffering begins if we are not mindful. If you've ever raised a child and watched them not live as you hoped, if you've ever loved and been loved back in a way that didn't match your heart, if you've given your all to a job and received no recognition, then you know Soma's feeling. However, in Zen and mindfulness practice, what we learn is not how to avoid sadness, but how to see it clearly without being swept away. Sadness is part of being human, but if your heart is wide enough, you will see that devotion is never lost. It simply changes form. Even in modern neuroscience, researchers at Stanford University have shown that when people work without craving rewards, brain regions associated with contentment, such as the prefrontal cortex and basal ganglia, become more active. That helps reduce anxiety, strengthen resilience, and create a deep sense of ease. Ultimately, the deeper lesson is this: love and give like a candle burning in the night, not because anyone is watching, but because shining is its nature. Do not let outer form dim inner value. A blackboard may no longer be written on, but if its lessons still live in someone's heart, it is still teaching. And perhaps, as the Zen master said, sometimes the empty board is the deepest lesson. Have you ever gotten angry over something very small, only to regret later that your reaction was excessive? Have you ever felt offended, not because someone truly hurt you, but simply because they touched a part of the ego you've been trying to protect? In life, there are times we think we're defending what's right, when in fact we're defending the ego, especially when we tie our self-worth to external things like honor status image or a robe. The Buddha taught, the wise abandon identity view, no longer seeing this body as me, mine, or myself. That is the beginning of liberation. When a practitioner starts to identify with the outer forms of practice, the kasaya robe, the chants, the role, the path becomes heavier, not lighter. That's why I want to share a story with you. Very simple, yet very profound. Once deep in a forest, where mist veiled the mountain slopes, and the wind whispered through the leaves like an ancient voice, there was a hidden Zen monastery, simple in form, yet steeped in the stillness of time, where the sound of bell and wooden drum seemed to pierce layers of distant memory. There a young monk had just been ordained. He was the disciple expected to carry on a Zen lineage that had lasted many generations. On the day of ordination, after the lamp transmission ceremony in the solemn hall, his teacher, a quiet, wise Zen master, gave him a treasure, an old kasaya robe, hand-embroidered stitch by patient stitch, passed down through many generations of heirs. It was not just a robe, but a symbol of a lineage of continuation and of the devotion of those who came before. The young monk received the robe with slightly trembling hands. He folded it neatly, his eyes shining as if he had been granted a precious treasure. From that day on, he tended to the robe, almost reverently wearing it only on special occasions, washing it only in clear water on sunny days, always folding it flat and placing it carefully in a small sandalwood-scented wooden box. Time passed, and he grew ever more attached to the robe, not only for its meaning, but for the feeling that he held a piece of history, a certain value. The robe was no longer just his, it had become part of an I, that was quietly growing within his practice. Then one morning, as usual, he left the monastery to go on alms round. The sky was clear. The village road lay under a gentle golden light. Villagers greeted him with simple smiles. And then something unexpected happened. A small dog suddenly dashed by. Its paws were caked with mud after the night's rain. In a split second before he could react, it brushed against him. A long, dark streak of mud appeared clearly along the hem of the kasaya. The stain landed right on the finely embroidered border, the part he smoothed straight every day. He froze, his whole body stiff. No mindful breathing now. No peaceful heart. Only shock quickly turning into anger. He spun around and raised his voice at the dog's owner standing behind. "Can't you watch your dog so it doesn't dirty my robe like this?" The man startled and stammered an apology. But the young monk's anger hadn't cooled. He muttered the rest of the way, gently lifting the robe's hem to inspect the mud as if it were a wound. Thoughts swirled in his head that sacred robe had been dirtied, which to him meant the honor and virtue he had painstakingly guarded had been insulted. What now? How to cleanse it? And why did this happen? Back at the monastery, he passed through the gate in silence, but his steps were tight and hurried. In the courtyard, his teacher was sweeping leaves, dry leaves falling in even layers, like reflections dropping away with the years. Hearing the hurried footsteps, the teacher looked up, his gaze as gentle as ever. The young monk quickly recounted what had happened, his voice still tinged with anger, his hand pointing at the stain. He spoke as if a precious part of his own body had been harmed. Then he waited, expecting his teacher to share his anger, or at least sympathize with his sense of loss. But the teacher only smiled softly. His eyes did not rest on the stain, but seemed to be looking at another mark inside. Then the teacher asked, "Are you angry because the robe is dirty, or because you feel your honor is stained along with it?" The question did not sound like a rebuke. It was like a drop of water falling onto a wind-ruffled lake of mind. He fell silent. Suddenly he felt foolish like a child. He felt pain, but the pain of truth being pointed out, not the pain of a stain. The teacher continued, his voice still light as the morning breeze. "If you see your value as lying in the cloth, then you are not wearing that robe with a practitioner's mind, but with the ego that is wearing it." He bowed his head. For the first time, he understood something very deep, not by reasoning, but by an inner opening. The robe was still there. The mud was still there. But what was sacred had changed. He was no longer angry. He felt only gratitude for the robe, for the dog, for the stain, and for the teacher's question. Just then, in the leaf-strewn courtyard, a breeze passed through. The leaves fluttered lightly, as if bowing to a letting go that had just begun. In Buddhist teaching, self-grasping clinging to the I is one of the deepest roots of suffering. But self-grasping is not merely the idea of who I am. It is subtler. It hides in seemingly harmless things, a compliment, a look of admiration, an achievement, or even the kasaya robe we wear. The robe, a dharma garment, is meant to remind practitioners to live simply humbly without clinging to appearances. But if one day we start to feel more noble when wearing it, if we feel insulted when someone soils it, then in that very moment, our mind has stepped off the path of liberation. Instead of seeing the robe as a means, we begin to see the robe as ourselves. We blur role and essence, and from there, suffering begins. The Buddha taught, "The Dharma is like a raft used to cross the river. Do not carry the raft on your shoulder once you've reached the other shore." It sounds simple, but it's a powerful reminder. However noble the form, even the Dharma itself, if it has fulfilled its task of ferrying us beyond suffering, we must let it go. Clinging to the means is losing the end. Clinging to symbols is forgetting the living spirit of the path. Imagine this: when the sun rises, a tree's shadow can stretch wide. It looks big, strong, majestic. But if you mistake the shadow for the tree, you live in illusion. When the sunlight shifts and the shadow disappears, you will be frightened. You will feel loss. Yet the root remains. The shadow is never the essence. So it is with the kasaya. It is the shadow, while the vow to practice is the root. If you define yourself by the robe, by others' eyes, by reputation or role, you will always be uneasy. But if you remember that your root is the mind of letting go, of kindness, of mindfulness, then nothing outside can truly harm you. This is why the path is not a journey of adding more, but of letting go, little by little, returning to the original pure root. The deeper lesson from this story is something each of us should pause to contemplate. Do not let form obscure essence. In a world where everything is easily judged by appearance, by the clothes you wear, the title you hold, how others see you, it is more important than ever to turn inward and ask, who am I really, without all those layers? If you are practicing living mindfully, quietly, dedicating yourself to family, community, or your own inner life, let it shine through genuine attitude and action. No need to display. No need to protect a reputation. No need to strain for recognition. Your presence, if truly calm and deep, will naturally spread. In daily life, this can be practiced through small but meaningful steps. Be honest with yourself. When are you being led by the need to be seen, to be praised? When are you trying to maintain a good image in others' eyes? When you notice it, don't rush to criticize yourself. Just gently let go. No forcing yourself to change. Simply stop clinging. And instead of always asking, "What do others think of me?" turn inward and ask, "Is my heart at peace?" A Harvard study shows that just 10 minutes of daily mindfulness can soothe the nervous system and significantly reduce overreactions to external triggers. In other words, when people touch the robe, when they doubt, judge, or look down on you, you won't be so easily shaken, because you know real value doesn't lie in the robe, but in the inner light. And so, it is with you. When you loosen your concern with appearances, you feel lighter, more at ease. Without piling on too many roles, you are still yourself, someone living authentically, returning to simplicity, depth, and freedom. And that, more than anything, is what draws others to you, to trust you, and to learn from you. No words needed, only presence. Have you ever felt not ready, not good enough, not complete enough to let go of something you've poured your whole heart into? Many of us live our entire lives haunted by the need to finish everything: a project, a relationship, an unfinished dream. We're afraid of being judged as quitters. We fear the unfinished will damage the image we hold of ourselves. But in the Buddhist teachings, there is a truth we often forget sometimes: letting go is the deepest form of completion. Not everything has to be done to be enough. Sometimes it is precisely the empty space that opens the door to a beauty fullness can never create. In the Diamond Sutra, it says, "All phenomena that have a form are illusory. Everything with form is impermanent. The more you try to fix it in place, the farther you move from the empty, quiet nature of Dharma." Long ago, in high mountains shrouded in year-round mist, there was a small monastery tucked among pine forests. Not far from it stood an old wooden hut where an elderly painter had lived in seclusion for many years. No one knew where he came from. They only knew he had once been a famous city painter, until one day he quietly left it all the spotlight, the exhibitions, the costly paintings to live in the mountains. From then on, he painted only to see, not to sell, not to display. People said his paintings had a spirit no work in the bustling world could match. He painted mist as if you could touch it. He painted mountains as if they were breathing. And when he painted forest paths fading into haze, viewers felt as though they themselves were walking there alone and in peace. Once a wealthy traveler came all the way to him bringing a bag of gold and an offer to buy everything in the hut. The painter simply smiled and closed the door. He did not hate money, but he understood some things cannot be traded for money. If beauty is locked inside a price tag, it loses its freedom. That year, as winter approached, his health waned. He knew he didn't have much time left. In his last days, he poured all his energy into finishing one painting, the final one of his life. It showed a mountain at dawn, when the sky still held a trace of night, and the mist drifted over the treetops. The painting made viewers feel as if they were standing atop the peak, inhaling the cold morning wind, hearing forest birds calling each other awake. But strangely, in a crucial corner of the painting where the sun was rising, he left it blank. No brushstroke, no color. When the painting was nearly complete, he summoned the monastery's abbot. They were old friends, seldom meeting, but deeply understanding each other. When the abbot entered the hut, the painter was sitting on a straw mat beside a small fire. The painting stood in the center of the room, soft light falling over it, making the colors even more dreamlike. The abbot stepped forward and stood before the painting for a long time. He said nothing, just looked. Then, as if without thinking, he smiled and said, "This painting is complete." The painter lifted his head to look at his friend, astonished. "But I haven't painted the sun. I was going to add a few strokes to clarify it. Some details still aren't sharp enough." The abbot didn't answer right away. He stepped closer, pointed to the empty space where the sun should be, and said, "It is precisely that emptiness that makes the viewer pause. It doesn't tell everything, so it invites. It isn't explicit, so it stirs the heart. What's unpainted is the most alive part of the whole painting." The painter fell silent. His brush hand trembled slightly. He looked again at that empty space, a patch of paper with no color, no line, and suddenly he saw light. Not light from ink, but from feeling, from what is left unsaid, from the quiet that makes anyone who looks stop, reflect, and then fill it in themselves. And in that moment, the painter understood true beauty is not what is perfect. It is what leaves room so another person's soul can step in. He set down the brush without another word, but his eyes dimmed by the years now shone as if beholding something vast. He understood that finishing is not the same as being done. Completion is in the letting go. The final painting, though missing the sun, was brighter than anything he had ever painted, because it wasn't trying to prove anything. It let the viewer find their own way. A few days later, the painter left this world as quietly as he had lived. The abbot took the last painting and hung it in the meditation hall. Everyone who came to the monastery would stand before it for a long time. Some said it wasn't finished. Some felt it was full. But everyone felt one thing: the painting wasn't just for looking. It was for listening. In modern life, we're obsessed with perfection, a fully equipped home, a flawless resume, a conflict-free relationship. We're taught that the more complete something is, the more valuable. The more detailed, the more trustworthy. The more finished, the more worth living. But in the light of Zen, it is the very incompleteness that opens a depth perfection can never touch. Remember the story of the painter and the abbot, where the unpainted sun became the brightest point of the work. That wasn't a shortcoming, but an invitation. That empty space makes the viewer stop. It leaves things unsaid so the viewer can breathe their own feeling into it. It doesn't conclude, so it stays alive. In Buddhism, this is more than an aesthetic technique. It is a deep wisdom. Spaciousness is the foundation of genuine seeing. When a cup is full, you cannot add a single drop without spilling. But a cup with space left, it's ready, it welcomes. So it is with the practitioner's mind. A mind already crammed with notions of what's right, what's enough, what should be, has no room for lived experience to soak in. The abbot did not praise the blank space because it was pretty, but because it permits. It doesn't occupy, dominate, or demand. It creates a space for others to enter as themselves. In meditation practice, that empty space is also the non-attached mind, where you are not imprisoned by expectations, not boxed in by roles or labels. You sit quietly without trying to paint anything onto this moment, and in that quiet, you begin to see more clearly because nothing is in the way. More deeply, that empty space is not just a gap on a canvas. It is an image of our lives. Your life's painting may still be unfinished, with strokes not yet laid down, with pieces not yet complete. But perhaps it is exactly the unpainted part that makes you alive. Perhaps the missing place is where the light comes in. So instead of trying to fill up your life in every way, try sitting with a little not knowing. Leave some open space in each day, no planning, no fixing, no striving. And perhaps in that very space, you will hear something deeper, the call of a mind not yet painted into a shape. In daily life, we are pulled into a relentless cycle, finishing tasks on time, handling every situation, smoothly piling up achievements to prove our worth. Society pushes us to become high-efficiency machines, but rarely asks, "Are you living?" We get so busy. We forget the Buddhist path is not built on perfection, but grounded in mindfulness. What is mindfulness? The ability to stop at the right time, not because you're giving up, but because it is enough. It's knowing how to listen to yourself when your inner life begins to ask for rest. An unfinished painting is not a failure. It can be an open space for life to enter. An uncompleted plan does not mean it's wrong. It can be a reminder to return to what matters more. A life with creases seen with the eye of non-self can become a wondrous symphony. Letting go in the spirit of Zen contemplation does not mean retreat or lack of will. It is the courageous act of not letting the ego pull you to extremes. Letting go is knowing that one more step might be crossing a line, not progress. This isn't just abstract philosophy. A Harvard study shows that people who deliberately pause to rest, observe, and reflect make more accurate decisions and have 23% lower anxiety than those who always chase finishing. Effectiveness doesn't come from doing more, but from choosing the right thing to do and the right moment to stop. So don't wait for perfection to allow yourself peace. Don't wait for the work to be done, expectations to be met, or others' approval before giving yourself a mindful breath. It may be that this very incomplete moment is the true doorway into a mindful life. A cup doesn't need to be brimming to be enough. Sometimes the empty space inside it is where new water can be poured. Your mind is the same. It doesn't need every condition to be complete before it deserves to rest in ease. You only need to stop, observe, and realize what you're seeking isn't in the finished part, but in what you have yet to paint. Have you ever asked yourself whether what you're gripping so tightly, a keepsake, a habit, a position, a relationship, is still helping you or actually binding you? In life, we often cling to the means so much that we forget the end. A tool that was once useful can become a burden when the mind is attached. In the Buddhist teaching, there is a simple but hard-to-live principle. The Dharma is like a raft used to cross a river. Don't carry the raft on your back after you've reached the other shore. Any means, whether a practice or an object, has value only as long as it serves awakening and benefit. When it is finished, its role letting go is wisdom and compassion. Ryokan was a Zen monk known to everyone in the countryside by the mountains. Not because he preached with great eloquence or abboted a large temple, but because his simple presence moved along footpaths and field edges like a cool breeze, with no name, no ownership, no attachment. He lived alone in a small thatched hut in a bamboo grove, no possessions, no crowd of students. His daily food came from alms, sometimes a handful of rice, sometimes a sweet potato. Yet everyone cherished him. Children called him the monk who plays stones because he often sat tossing pebbles with them by the stream. Adults called him the bamboo stick monk because the staff in his hand was always there like a part of his body. That staff was nothing fancy. It was a length of bamboo, carefully whittled rounded at the tip, its surface polished smooth by time with every step he walked. He never parted from it, walking, standing, even when sitting in meditation under the trees. People said the staff had been with him for more than 30 years since he left the monastery to live as a hermit. One late autumn morning, as leaves began to turn and the wind drifted softly through the bamboo, Ryokan walked along the forest edge as usual. Suddenly, he stopped. In the stillness, a small but plaintive sound broke out, the thin, broken cry of a kitten calling for help. He tilted his head and quickly followed the sound. Deep in a thicket of bamboo, dense and sharp like hundreds of tiny blades, a kitten was trapped. Its small body was wedged between crisscrossed culms like a snare. Each time it struggled, the bamboo scraped its skin, making it screech more desperately. Without a moment's hesitation, Ryokan bent down and used his bamboo staff to pry the stalks apart. He was careful, yet swift his movements soft as flowing water. Then crack a sharp snap sounded. The bamboo staff split in two, breaking into halves that fell to the ground. Ryokan paused a moment, glanced at the broken staff, then without wavering, used his bare hands to pull the bamboo aside and free the kitten. After a few minutes, the kitten tumbled onto the ground, panting eyes still wild with fear, but safe. A young disciple who had been quietly following Ryokan to learn by observing him witnessed the whole thing. He rushed over, picked up the two broken pieces of the staff, his face still stunned. "Master, this staff, you've kept it for so many years. How could you let it break like that?" he asked, his tone tinged with gentle reproach. Ryokan turned to his student, his gaze calm and full of compassion. He didn't answer right away. He simply bent down, stroked the kitten's back, then said slowly, "If the staff can no longer help me save a life, what use is there in keeping it?" The disciple fell silent. Looking at the trembling kitten curled in the leaves, Ryokan's eyes held neither sadness nor regret. He continued, as if speaking to the grove. "The staff broke the cat lives. That is enough." In the silence after those words, the wind moved through the bamboo like the sound of flutes. The kitten looked at him one last time, then slipped into the brush and vanished as if it had never been there. Ryokan picked up the two halves, set them together without a hint of lament, and walked on barefoot on the earth, hands empty of a staff. It wasn't until many years later, when that disciple himself became a guide for the young, that he truly understood what Ryokan meant to teach. That staff wasn't just an object. It was a symbol of habit, of attachment, of the things we deem indispensable. But Ryokan showed that even the closest, most familiar thing, if it blocks compassion, and the act of saving must be released. Letting go is not loss. It is returning freedom to both ourselves and others. The story spread through the village like a wordless gatha. People didn't just remember the broken bamboo staff, they remembered the moment the old monk placed a small being's life above 30 years of attachment. They began to see the bamboo staff differently, not as a staff of authority or time, but as a staff of compassion and non-self. Ryokan's answer wasn't merely about a stick. It was a wake-up call about how we face loss, not of material things, but of ego. For 30 years, that staff had been like an extension of his body memory journey companion in quiet. But when faced with the choice between saving a tiny life and keeping a familiar emblem, Ryokan did not hesitate. The hesitation the student felt is the same hesitation we feel when forced to release something that once felt like part of me. How many suffer, not because they lose a tool, but because they lose the identity tied to it. I'm the one who holds that position. I'm the owner of that house. I'm admired for my wisdom, wealth, success. When those things are gone, we collapse not because the staff is missing, but because the ego has nothing to cling to. For Ryokan, the staff was never me. It was only a means. And a means, no matter how cherished, can never be set above life. That is the purest expression of compassion. No words, no philosophy, just action. And in that action, he practiced what others spend lifetimes reading about non-self. When the I no longer wedges itself into every choice, loss stops being loss. It becomes a natural transformation, like water running from high to low, like a leaf falling back to its root. No more resistance, no more regret, only presence. Imagine holding a handful of salt and dropping it into a glass of water. The salt overwhelms the taste, and the water is hard to drink. But the same handful in a large lake is hardly noticed. The salt hasn't changed. The capacity of what contains it has. That is the difference between suffering and peace. Attachment is like a small glass, a bit of loss, a rejection, a criticism. An unexpected change makes the whole mind salty. But if you train your mind to become a vast lake where every loss can dissolve you, no longer react extremely to turmoil. You begin to love even the breaking the way ryokan loved the staff that had fulfilled its mission. To most people, a broken stick is a small detail, but in the world of Zen, it is a great lesson, a reminder that to save what is alive, you must be ready to let the old pass. No clinging, no binding. Do not carry into tomorrow what no longer fits. The final question which Ryokan left in silence is for you. If the staff in your hand broke today, would you mourn or would you smile, knowing it had done its job? In daily life, you may not carry a staff like Ryokan, but you may carry a sentimental shirt, a job you've kept for many years, or a relationship that was once an anchor, now only a shadow of the past. And you still keep it, not because it still brings value, but because letting go scares you. So, the question isn't, should I keep it? It's, is this still nourishing me and the people I love? Or is it only a symbol of an old self, a bygone identity, a title I once took pride in? In Buddhism, letting go does not mean abandoning everything, loving no one, doing nothing. Letting go is not cold or indifferent. In its deepest sense, letting go is an act of wisdom, seeing clearly that something has finished its role and setting it down. Not out of denial, but out of respect. Not from disappointment, but from knowing it is time to transform. If you want to begin practicing this, there is a very simple method. Each night before sleep, write down one thing you've held too long, a feeling, an old dream, a lingering anger, a self-blaming thought, or an expectation that no longer fits. Be specific. Then place the paper on the table. Close your eyes, take a deep breath in, and exhale 3 times. Whisper softly, I allow this to leave. It sounds small. Science is on your side. According to a Stanford study, when people write down and release something, even just a memory activity in the amygdala, the center tied to fear and emotional reactivity drops by up to 23%. This doesn't just help you sleep. It helps keep that thing from quietly controlling you. You don't need a quiet meditation room or a mountain monastery to start. Just a pen, a sheet of paper, and a willing heart. Because forgiveness and letting go, as the Zen masters teach, aren't lofty spiritual acts reserved for the enlightened. They're medicine for the nervous system. They're inner freedom that any of us can touch right in the middle of ordinary life. You can still work, still love, still be devoted to someone or something. The difference is this: you're no longer bound by it. You live in the world, but aren't dragged by it. You use the means without being used by the means. You walk on not with feet heavy with fear, but with a heart made lighter by one less burden. In your life, have you ever touched something that used to be familiar, but has now changed? A childhood home, a keepsake, a relationship, a sound. You touch it and realize the form is gone, but the memory, the feeling, and the spirit within remain. It reminds me of the Buddha's words in the Dhammapada: mind precedes all phenomena. Mind is their chief. They are mind-made. When the mind is pure, happiness follows like a shadow that never leaves. A bell, like any other form, is only a means to stir the mind. But if your mind still remembers that vibration, then even if the bell no longer rings, it is still resonating within you. So where does the bell's true value lie? In the cracked bronze or in the mindfulness it once awakened? One autumn afternoon, as the sun began to sink behind distant hills, the light turned gentle, like a silk scarf let go by someone's hand. The wind drifted through the trees with a soft rustle, carrying the smell of damp earth and cooking smoke from far-off homes. On a small shaded path, a Zen master and a young novice walked unhurriedly, as if there were no particular destination, only walking, only being present in each moment. They passed a vacant lot where an old temple had once stood. Villagers said it had been famous, a place of pilgrimage for generations, but upheaval, war, natural disaster, and human neglect had left it in ruins. Now only a few crumbling brick walls remained. The tiled roof, gaped with holes and weeds, had woven themselves through every crack, covering the traces of what had once been sacred. In the remnant of a brick courtyard hung a large bronze bell on a rotting wooden frame. It had been cast in the previous century by the faith labor and vows of an entire community. Now its body was coated with green moss, and a long crack ran from top to bottom. When wind slipped through the fissure, the sound it made was no longer a resonant peal, but something like a sigh, vague and solitary. Beside the bell lay an old wooden striker, its head worn and broken, as if to testify to time's slow erosion. No one was there. Only stillness, moss, and drifting memories asleep in the air. The novice stopped. He looked at the bell, then turned to the master. His eyes held a sincere sadness, the gaze of someone young confronting something once great that had become useless. "Master, this bell is broken. Even if we struck it now, it probably wouldn't sound." The master didn't answer. He simply walked slowly to the bell and bowed gently, as if greeting an old friend. Then he just exhaled a long, steady, light breath. No striking, no shaking, no testing whether the bell would ring. The novice was surprised. He stepped closer and asked in a whisper, "Why didn't you try to strike it?" The master looked at him and smiled the smile of one who sees beyond sound. "Because the bell's sound no longer lies in sound." The boy froze. The master's quiet eyes seemed to look through the moss, through the crack, through time itself. Many years ago, countless people heard this bell and awakened. He said slowly, "Now even if it no longer makes a tone, the memory of that awakening remains intact in our hearts. So the true bell does not reside in bronze, but in the listener's mind." He lightly placed his hand on the bell's body. It was cold, rough. The crack under his fingertips felt like a scar of time. But within the master, the ringing continued, not from metal, but from a place deep inside. Sometimes what we poured our hearts into a temple, a friendship of faith, will not keep its original form over time. But if its spirit has soaked into people's hearts, it still lives. The true bell is never lost. The novice lowered his head and fell silent. He said nothing, but in his eyes something seemed to break open and then brighten like a soundless tone struck inside a young heart. Autumn wind still moved across the courtyard, brushing down a yellow leaf to land at their feet. The day's last light pooled on the cracked bell, making it look like a sacred statue asleep. "Master," the novice said softly, after a long while then, "can a person be like this bell?" The master looked at him, not answering at once. A gentle gust passed. Then he replied, voice light as breath, "Yes. There are those who, because of age, injury, or time, can no longer ring the way they once did. But if what they lived and transmitted once formed part of another's awakening, then they are still a bell ringing only. The resonance lies within." The novice nodded slowly. He needed no more words. That answer was enough for him to understand. Some things don't need to ring to be a true bell. In the late daylight, the two stood there saying nothing more, as if silence itself were the bell resounding across the open space. A bell without sound, yet awakening many things in the heart. The bell was cracked. It no longer rang as before, but that very fact makes us pause and ask, then what is the true bell? In the Buddha's teaching, all phenomena are impermanent. Nothing lasts forever. The bell that once pealed each morning, calling people back to their breath and to themselves, eventually cracked and fell silent. A temple once crowded with worshippers can become abandoned. Even this body is moving through the stages of aging and decay. Nothing is permanent. No one keeps their role, their voice, or their glory forever. This is a law, not a tragedy. Yet its strange loss itself helps us see what is real. The bell may fall silent, but the mindfulness it awakened, if it has been planted in people's hearts, never disappears. It becomes an invisible bell ringing in the quiet. You won't hear it with your ears. You'll feel it with your heart. Whenever you slow your breathing, whenever you pause amid life's churn, whenever you suddenly remember what is true, and enough that bell is ringing. The Buddha said, "The Dharma is like a raft used to cross a river. Once across, do not carry the raft on your back." It sounds simple, but living it is a lifelong awakening. We often cling to symbols, forms, and habits, mistaking them for essence. We think the bell is the sound, but the bell is just the raft. The tone is only the striking. What truly needs keeping is the mindfulness that was called forth, not the object that called it. Imagine you once had a song tied to a deep memory. Now you never hear it, no radio, no file on your phone, yet only a faint melody somewhere, or even just a scent, a patch of sunlight, a corner of a familiar cafe, and the whole memory rises as if it never slept. The outer sound is gone. The inner sound never left. So it is with the bell without sound. It teaches us to let go of dependence on form. It teaches us that mindfulness doesn't come from outside. It is a quiet region within, waiting for you to settle and touch it. And if you grasp this from now on, you won't need to wait for any bell, because you yourself are the bell ringing in the world. There's a common misconception in modern life that what is broken old or changed in form no longer has value. The truth is the opposite. Some things reveal their essence only when the outer shell is gone. A broken bell can still bring mindfulness if the bell's spirit remains alive within you. This is the heart of meditation practice. Awakening doesn't come from external form, but from inner strength. You don't need a physical bell to stop and breathe deeply. Only a single intention, a memory, a feeling, a recollection is enough to bring you back. Similarly, a scripture may fade with time, but the teaching you once understood, if it has soaked into your heart, remains. Loved ones may no longer be with you, but the love they planted in you still burns like a candle in the wind. It is consciousness that preserves the sacred, not matter. You can practice this each morning. Before you step into the day's bustle, take 3 deep breaths, place your hand on your chest, and remind yourself, mindfulness is not outside me. It is within me. This simple yet powerful sentence is like a key that opens the door inward. And when you pass a place that was once familiar, but is now changed, or when a treasured item is gone, don't rush to regret. Breathe as I breathed before that cracked bell. Don't seek sound in the object. Seek the echo within yourself. Modern science is beginning to confirm what ancient teachers lived and taught. A well-known study from Stanford University found that when people connect with positive memories and practice mindfulness regularly, activity in the amygdala, the center for fear and emotional reactivity, decreases significantly. This helps people remain calm amid upheaval. Science calls it emotional memory, meaning form may vanish, but the emotional energy, if deep enough, persists and continues to shape how you live. And the wonderful thing is, you don't need a formal ritual or a literal bell. Just a present breath, a gentle reminder, a sincere heart enough to awaken. Perhaps that is the deepest meditation bell, the bell that doesn't enter through the ear but resounds endlessly in the heart. When you stand before a silent bell in your life, a keepsake without its sound, a relationship gone quiet, a once familiar place now changed, remember what truly matters never disappears. It lives in your breath, your memory, your mind. And so we close the story of the silent bell, a gentle reminder that the sacred lies not in the echo, but in the mindfulness within. When you close your eyes tonight, please remember you are not alone on the path of letting go and healing. Beneath the layers of busyness, pressure, and nameless worries, there is always a quiet field of peace waiting for your return, not through effort, not through grasping, but through trust and release. We don't need to know how to control everything. We don't need to understand the workings of the universe, of breath of life or death. The deepest truths are often those the intellect cannot seize. They can only be fully lived through acceptance and letting go. Letting go is not an ending, but a beginning. It's when you stop struggling against the current and start gliding with trust. It's when you stop clinging to what has passed, so your hands can open to receive what is coming. It's when you understand that control is not strength. True, strength is trusting the natural rhythm of life. I am truly grateful you've traveled with me on this journey, where each still moment is a chance to know yourself more deeply, to be more at ease, and to live more fully. If these reflections bring you a bit of peace, I invite you to share that with others by liking, sharing the video, subscribing to the Buddhism Seeds channel, and leaving your thoughts and feelings below. Each comment is not only a connection, but a gift to those also seeking light in the dark. Wishing you a truly peaceful night. May gentle dreams lead you back to yourself. And when dawn comes, may you wake with a new heart, lighter, clearer, and freer. Sleep well,